Okay, I'll call this June 26th work session to order. If you join me for a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to item number 3, citizens' comments. Do we have citizens? Barry, are you here for? Okay.
No, just here to listen.
All right, then we'll go to item 4. Lakeville Fire Relief Association update, and I believe Chief Meyer is kicking it off, or?
I'm gonna let Dan Quam. and
Okay.
Jesse Neergart for the relief board. Talk
Sounds
about
good.
the memo.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us be here tonight. My name is Dan Quam. I'm president of the Lakeville Fire Relief Board. My esteemed colleague to my left here is Jesse. Jesse's been serving as our secretary on the board for the past few years. Oh. So, anyways, typically our appearance around this time of year in connection with this memo has a particular financial objective involved with it, and usually it's around an increase to the benefit level that we're seeking for our firefighters. This year, the objective is a little different, and really it is about information sharing. Just to come back to you, let you know what the discussions were this year around the decision that ultimately we came up with, which is not to increase the benefit level at all. And obviously, the financial performance of our fund was the main motivator in arriving at that decision. I think anybody that's looked at their 401k over the last 18 months has realized that the financial performance of these investments has not been great of late. But also, we want to maintain the partnership and the commitment that we've made with all of you in the city to trying to stay within the boundaries that we've set of that 115% funding level for the pension itself. So, as we outlined in the memo too that we circulated, this benefit that we offer our firefighters is, I would argue, the greatest tool that we have for recruiting and retention. And so even though this decision was made not to ask for an increase to the level itself, we did take the opportunity to consult with some other firefighters relief boards that have gone through some of the transitions that we're experiencing here in Lakeville, and get their thoughts and ideas around how can we continue to make this attractive even if we're not increasing the benefit level this year. And many of the ideas were around the vesting schedule itself. We presently, and I believe, at least as long as I've been around, it's been 20 years to be fully vested, and then 7 years to reach a point of partial vesting. And quite frankly, that's challenging, to recruit with, given, I guess, some of the other parameters that we've set as a department around proximity to stations, who is able and willing to fill the role of a firefighter here in Lakeville. Some of the feedback we received was, to trim the vesting schedule to 5 years for partial vesting, 10 years for full vesting. And some of the additional commentary around that really was, the state legislature might mandate that very soon. So they were encouraging us to get out in front of it and make that decision ourselves. Outside of that, Jesse, was there anything I'm missing?
No, I think last time we spoke, Dan and we talked and working with Geraldine and Joshua about a target of 115%. So we wanted to hold to that commitment that you made with us last year. So, and I think we're pretty close to that number, just coincidentally almost. But I will say the membership challenged us on this approach. And, some were not, feel like we should always ask. Why wouldn't we just ask? And we're not saying that if you want to change our minds, we would certainly accept. But I do think we're trying to like really maintain a smart relationship as far as financially how the department works and how we incentivize our members. But it is changing, as you all know. You're working through a lot of different parameters with the chief about full-time firefighters and all the expenses that come along with that. But I would just ask you not to forget that there's still going to be more on-call firefighters than full-time firefighters. And the truth is, I think they may be harder to retain in a combination department because they're kind of now become a second-tier firefighter in some ways. So how do we keep them engaged and keep them incentivized to do the job? So.
What's the conversation like in the department about, do people give up at 13, 14 years to get to the 20? Or, what does it do to retention from, just candidly, we could go from 20 to 10? Yeah. Do you think a bunch of people leave at 10, I guess is my question.
I think you would see more of it, frankly, yes, I think you would. But the last time that I checked, I believe the average tenure for a Lakeville firefighter is like 6 years. So on average, they're not realizing anything out of this benefit.
So maybe you get them 4 more years.
Maybe you get them 4 more years and reach a point of full vesting.
I think the lower number from 7 to 5 is probably a bit more of the incentive, where a 2 or 3 year member would be like, I got 5 more years to go. I'm going to, right. Or I'm going to take this job or whatever their choice is, or I'm just going to quit. Where if they're like, oh, if I can go for 2 more years, at least I've got some retirement to look forward to. So I think from that perspective, 7 years is a long time to wait for $1 of pension benefits. So I think that's what we're hoping would happen.
I agree. And I think the demographic has changed for your average volunteer firefighter in Lakeville, right? You don't see as many 25-year-olds that are able to buy a house within 2 miles of the fire station. Just economically isn't viable for a lot of them. So, you have somebody like myself that decided to join the department at the ripe age of 38, and, knowing that I might reach a point of full vesting at 48, I guess has a little more appeal to it than, well, I'd have to ride this out until I'm close to 60 if I wanted to, be fully vested in this. So I do think we're mindful of the fact that those that are applying, that dynamic has changed too.
Is there a financial impact to go to, and what does that mean to the pension to do that, Geraldine?
It would, as Dan mentioned, at 7 years, they're eligible for the pension, but at a much reduced rate. And it increases each year. So if you went to a lower rate or a lower vesting period, now they're eligible to receive that. So we do factor that into the projections that there is some liability associated with that, but with the recent calculations, it was, certainly that threshold, 115% was down.
So, and then the annual benefit wouldn't increase in year 11. It's just the same, but you're getting the full.
Correct.
Just like if you were 21, 22, 23 years. Okay. Other questions? Comments?
I'd have to see a more detailed financial impact and the suggestions to be able to keep it at 115.
Yep. No, we'd be happy to provide all of that information to you. And we have a good partner in the firm that we've worked with for at least the last few years. And they've given us the tools to be able to, manipulate the numbers for forecasting, and we'd be happy to share that with the council.
Then the only other thing would be reaching out to the other hybrid cities that have done it hybrid for, I don't know, let's just put a timetable on it, at least 5 years. So that there's some history there with determining what effect it has on the on-call volunteers. So, and positive and negative effects.
Fair ask. We'll make sure that we get that information to you.
I would just add one more thing, just in case you come across our members out in the community. That this isn't an easy discussion internally either, talking about vesting schedules and things like that, right? There's plenty of 18-year members who don't, we did it, why should it be any different for anybody else, right? So we're working through those conversations. But so, just so you know, we started that dialogue about a month ago. I'd say we're, perfectly at a 50-50 split between who likes it and who doesn't. But we'll keep.
Well,
working.
is there any conversation in just moving it down by like 5 years? So it's 15 years,
Certainly.
then eventually at another time you can, if the numbers would were to work out, you could move it down. But that is a big jump. 10 years is a
Yeah,
huge.
I think that would be too.
Right. And I think when we looked at the models, it was that 15 and 10 year partial vesting, or I'm sorry, 15 and 5, thank you, that we were much more comfortable with based on where that fit within our current commitments to the city.
Well, you might even consider 7 and 15. Just
Yeah.
Well-
dropping the top end versus the bottom end, so.
Sure. Yep, that would be a good first step.
Part of it is a little bit ceremonious in the sense that really we kind of set the bar. If you have a career in this department, you've been on for 20 years because that's the vesting schedule, which is a long time. Frankly, it's probably better for as we learn more about mental health and all these other things that maybe we shouldn't have people doing this job as long. So this would give people the ability to step away at 15 years and still feel like they put in a career. Before. So that's another upside, in my opinion.
What's the percentage at the partial investment and how does it? So if we went to 5, what is the partial investment?
It's 7 to
4% per
42%.
year. Yeah, it's 4% per year. So I think it's 42 at 7, and then it's 46 at 8, and
So it changed a little bit,
climbs to.
obviously.
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't ask for any money, so.
Well,
Good meeting.
I think that's the only comment I was going to make. I mean, because in our meetings over the last 6 months, I've actually been the one pushing for us to have an ask. Partially because I think with a 0 increase, we've also already lost the value that we set it at last year, just with inflation costs and increases. And so I was pushing for us to have some sort of ask for a discussion point, but that does require a city contribution. It hasn't been something we've done for several years at this point. But I think part of my thought process behind that is that we should continue to build capacity for what this hybrid department looks like. And that's going to be more expensive than what we're investing in our paid on call fire department as of now. So I don't want the sticker shock of that hybrid department just to come out of the blue, which I know you're working on and your team is working on. But I don't know. That personally, I think there should have been some sort of increase for this year. But I respect the no ask as well.
So the next steps, just have a little bit more information and we'll discuss in July. Is that kind of?
I would. No, there's no time frame on it.
Oh, okay.
But I will just say to Jonathan's point that next time we are here, we will have an ask.
Hopefully the economy turns around. Okay, appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look at that. Okay, we will move on to item number 5, our legislative session recap. And it says Mr. Miller.
I can take that, Mayor. And so it's up to you how you want to handle it. We have Jack Brooksbanks from Campbell Pennington.
Yeah, let's just,
He's going to focus on presentation on that. There's a whole lot of other items, so I'll leave it up to you on what order you want to go in.
yeah, let's try to focus on that first. I think it's probably gonna be the longest discussion.
Okay.
And just some of this other stuff is just updates and then we can be mindful of your time.
Welcome.
Can you remind
Thank you
me
for having
again what page is PowerPoint?
So that'll probably start. No, it's going to be page 79.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're up.
All right. Well, Mayor, Council, thank you very much for having me. My name is Jack Brooksbank. I'm here with Kevin Knudsen, City Attorney's Office. We're talking about the Minnesota cannabis legalization. As you can obviously see, I brought some slides with me, so I can talk through those, but also if you have any questions, any particular, anything you'd like to talk more about, go into more depth on, feel free to step in at absolutely any time, and I can talk about whatever you are most interested in talking about. So kind of starting off, so 2023 is the year it finally happened, with a big asterisk that although the legislation was passed this year, not everything is actually happening this year. There's a lot of regulations and things that will still need to get made. So we're still looking fairly far out for when some of these things are actually gonna be changed on the ground. This presentation goes through kind of an overview. The disclaimer here being that there's a lot of things that are going to be worked out, or that we know there will be rules about, but we don't know what the rules are yet. And there's a lot of, there's some uncertainty with, this is a big change. There's a lot of new provisions, how some of these things are going to work in practice, how they're going to interact with other areas of the law. So a recurring theme you're going to hear from me is, well, we're watching that really closely. So at a high level plan, sort of 3 main points: legalizes private individual use, possession, and even some limited growing for yourself. It starts this summer. The second one is there's going to be the whole commercial market be regulated by a new state agency called the Office of Cannabis Management, or OCM. And then the third part is going to be expungement of convictions under previous law. That's all going to be handled, that third part is all going to be handled through a state expungement board. So I'm not really going to touch on it. I can talk about it if you have any questions, but it's not something the city will be involved in. Big important flashing lights. Notice there have been no changes to federal law. So it is still cannabis, marijuana. The terminology gets a bit muddled, but it is still all illegal. It is still a Schedule I drug under federal law. Particularly relevant for any city employees who are carrying firearms or who have a CDL, because those are sort of more direct licenses through the federal government, through ATF or the DOT. And so, DOT still considers any THC in your system to be grounds for denying or revoking a CDL. So that's still an important thing to keep in mind.
Can I ask a question about the OCM? Is it gonna be run like the Met Council? I mean, are they gonna have that much freedom to tweak, come up with rules and regulations, et cetera, that aren't necessarily in statute?
So certainly not the level of discretion of the Met Council. I mean, it'll be, like the, it's an office, so it's not quite the same as like the Pollution Control Agency or the DNR.
Is it gonna
But
be
it's,
like the Department of Education where they can still come up with their own rules?
there will be a lot of rules coming up. They do have some fairly substantial rulemaking authority. The things that they can make rules about are a little bit more, sort of circumscribed. But they do have pretty substantial rulemaking authority. And so some of the things, so there will be a maximum potency on cannabis edibles. And the rule in the statute is the agency will make a rule about this.
So will they go through the same rulemaking process then, where
So
it's
the-
open to the public for commenting through a certain period of time, et cetera?
So they have been given access to, there is an expedited rulemaking process, but it is still a notice and comment, open to the public rulemaking process. Potentially subject to, public comments, public hearings, potentially subject to challenge through the Office of Administrative Hearings. So,
Thank you. I was just trying to get a handle on how broad their authority was going to be.
Yes. Pretty broad. And they'll be involved in sort of most aspects of the kind of regulation. Eventually, there's kind of a transitionary scheme. We'll get into that a little bit more.
That's a little bit of my question, kind of dovetails. Is there an enforcement arm?
So there is an enforcement and inspections wing. There are also some of it will be left to cities. There's sort of certain compliance checks, like the police department does with, liquor stores or tobacco stores, where you're sending in a volunteer minor to try and purchase something and see if they'll sell it to you. So there are also some city enforcement responsibilities. And again, I'll get a little bit more into detail on what those are. I'll make sure to touch on that.
We're having some flickering with the projector, but it should come back momentarily.
Okay.
Well,
They all
but
have-
then
they all have-
You have it in
we
your
have it.
packet, so
Yeah,
we'll
so
just
you-
follow along.
Okay, so look at the use slide, just kind of briefly going through this. So broadly permits adult, and that is 21 and up. Use and possession, there are some limits on the amount that you can use. You can also grow a limited amount for yourself. It's 8 plants, 4 of which can be mature at any time. No one has still given me a good answer on if that's a lot or not, but 8 plants, that's what you
Over
get.
time, it's a lot.
So use, so you can use in private residences or on private property not generally open to the public, or at a licensed premise. We'll go through how you get a licensed premise later on. So it's not, we have this photo here. This would not be legal under the new law. So you're not going to be able to just walk down the street, smoking a pipe or sit in a city park and use.
So one thing that they mentioned at all MC last week was to establish a misdemeanor ordinance by August 1st, so that if there is a situation that's being used in a park.
Yeah.
Is that a similar conversation that you've had?
Yep. So it's can be a petty misdemeanor.
Yep.
So that's something that the city is allowed to pass. I would probably encourage it. So without city action, it is prohibited, but without a penalty. So it's important to have enforcement ability.
Do we currently disallow tobacco smoke?
We're gonna read what that's got to say. We don't.
Okay,
So
so those are 2 conversations that we
that would, I mean,
set aside now, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
currently allowed to smoke tobacco in parks.
okay, well, let's set that aside. Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and it doesn't mean you can't prohibit that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is I think we should have a conversation about prohibiting that and the petty misdemeanor, so.
Yes.
Just gonna make a note of that.
So cannabis is still subject to general smoking prohibitions. There's the Indoor Clean Air Act, is why you can't smoke in bars and restaurants. And that just fully applies to cannabis as it applies to tobacco.
Is that also for vaping?
Yep. So it's, I think, sort of any airborne burning or vaporization. But that's just for inside. So there's no, you can step right out the door and smoke there, except that it's in public. So you still can't use. So there's some of these things are a little duplicative. They just wanted to make sure they had some specifics, I guess.
So if a restaurant has a patio, they can allow smoking on the patio?
I believe so. Yes, they can allow. So there are some restrictions on, as far as the cannabis, you would have to have a on-site consumption license, and the only ones that are talked about in the statute are for a lower potency edible products. It's not clear if there will be through the agency sort of a more full potency on-site license. So the base assumption we're going off of is that on-site, sort of on-site in public consumption is going to be limited to kind of currently the seltzers and the gummies that are sort of the currently available products. There was an open container analog. You were not allowed to be in a car with access to opened containers of gummies or cannabis. Those have to be in sort of, sealed commercial containers or inaccessible. And of course, you can't use or be under the influence while you're driving either. And then.
But you also can't, so if there's 4 people in a car, the other 3 can't be smoking.
Nope, can't be smoking, and like with alcohol, can't have, open gummies or anything. So if, for example, the police pull someone over and they find, a package of open gummies, there's no defense that like the passenger says, oh no, those are mine, the driver wasn't using. Doesn't matter, not allowed to have them in the car.
And then, so does the statute contain a provision like the open container? Not only the person who has it, but the driver can be charged with allowing.
That's my understanding, yeah.
And that'll be a state statute. That's not something.
Yep, that's state statute, not something that the city necessarily needs to get involved with. And then no use or possession of any kind in schools or correctional facilities. So even sealed, even inaccessible, whatever, just can't bring it onto school grounds. There are specific types of employees that are listed it is a bit of a weird way that they've done it. So it is not prohibited, but the city, it is still considered a drug for drug testing purposes for these 7 categories of employees, which does include police officers and firefighters. So for anyone in these positions, it would, we should still be making clear that use is still not allowed as an employment matter. It's not necessarily criminal charges or any kind of penalty associated with it, but to be an employee in one of these positions, you cannot be using. So the sort of regulatory linchpin of this is going to be the new OCM. It will formally be created on July 1st. So they will be doing a lot of licensing and regulation, a lot of reporting, and some press releases from there's a website, even though they aren't formally created yet, indicates that they will be unlikely to start actually licensing anything until first quarter of 2025. Just that's how long it's going to take until they are ready to start issuing licenses. They also have a lot of other duties. They'll be doing a lot of pilot programs and compiling a lot of reports. They also will be putting out some model ordinances for cities. So things like zoning and registration and some of the things I'll get into at the end of the presentation here. So they'll be putting out some models for that. Regulations they have, there are 16 new types of license that are going to be issued through the state.
That was the craziest thing I ever read.
There's a lot of them. And so it's, cultivation, manufacture, distribution, retail, split between
Seed to sale.
medical, recreational, and then like I mentioned, the terminology is changing fast with this stuff. So a year ago, we were talking about cannabinoid products. Now we're talking about cannabis versus hemp. It's sort of the 3-2 beer equivalent for cannabis. And so it has to come from plants with a lower concentration, although they then just make an extract and make all the products from a concentrate anyway. And it's limited to, I believe, 5 milligrams of THC per dosage. So that's sort of the lower potency.
Have they decided yet what full strength is?
More than 5 milligrams per dose. So anything or anything whatsoever that comes from, so they define a cannabis plant as, the scientific genus of the plant with above a certain concentration of THC. And then a hemp plant is that same species of plant with below a certain concentration of THC. So anything from a cannabis plant or anything with more than 5 milligrams per dose is full strength.
So you'd be smart to become a plant geneticist genetics person and make millions of dollars.
So Paul's Markets too.
Yeah.
Does it allow for vertical integration? I mean, can somebody do all of the
It's
16 licenses?
specifically does not. It specifically bans that kind of vertical integration. Um,
16 tier system.
Big weed.
Yes, 16 acres.
Yeah. So creates a new retail license. I'll be focusing mostly on retail since that's mostly how the city will be involved. So new retail business like liquor stores.
I was say, so on the muni, someone had told me that cities are not allowed to open for 4 years after licensing starts to like allow a competitive advantage. Was that in there or is that not right?
That is not anything I have heard before.
It was in a previous version.
Oh, it was.
Okay.
Okay.
The only thing we can't be is exclusive.
So there are a lot of sort of restrictions on these licenses. Included among that is restrictions on the other types of licenses that you can hold and the number of licenses that you can hold. So in theory, the goal here is to avoid big weed, and we're going to have sort of your mom and pop smoke shop.
If I remember right, Jack, I think like one person can have 5 licenses, I think.
I believe it's something like that.
One per city, I think is how I remember it. So
So you could operate in like 5 cities.
that's how I,
Mhm. And if you have a retail license, then you cannot also have a cultivation or manufacture or distribution license. It's trying to kind of keep that split up. There's also for the sort of full strength dispensary licenses, it's really restrictive on the types of products that you can sell. So you can sell cannabis, paraphernalia, branded clothing, cannabis literature, and products that detect fentanyl. And that's it. That's all you can sell. So no alcohol, no food, no tobacco, no video games.
So a traditional vape shop could not get a marijuana license?
Not one of the full strength licenses, no. It has to be a sort of a completely separate business.
That's interesting.
These licenses are going to be issued by OCM, by the state. There will not, the state will call the city to ask about zoning compliance and if the city has any particular concerns. So if there's, for example, an applicant that has had significant compliance problems with other businesses, to sort of supply that information. But the city will not actually be involved in the decision-making of which licenses to issue.
Will they do the background checks?
Yep. Background checks, security plans, zoning compliance, product compliance, training for salespeople. It's a fairly robust license application. It's just all through the state of Minnesota and not through the city at all.
So does the state do the enforcement too?
It's a bit of a split. Like I sort of mentioned earlier, there are some enforcement duties that are sort of directed at the city. There's also some monetary support to, sort of pay for those enforcement efforts.
So will we be reporting then yearly to the OCM on our going out there and testing the waters if they violate any rules, et cetera? Are we gonna have mandatory reporting?
Not sure exactly. I think that might be something the agency is going to be. That would be more of like a regulation type of a thing. The city will have enforcement power if you go and do a compliance check and find them to be not in compliance. The city will be able to suspend their operations for up to 30 days. And then there will be if the city does that, then there is a mandatory must inform OCM if you've taken adverse action. And I have a slide later on about sort of exactly what happens if you find them out of compliance.
The lynch, though, that's helpful for us is it can put their other licenses in jeopardy too. So if they have a tobacco license, but they have a cannabis compliance issue, we can punish them twice. Or is that right? That's how it's described at LCN.
Okay, I had not looked into that quite as much. It would make sense that pretty much, liquor licenses and tobacco licenses usually always say, have you had any other state licenses revoked? So that seems like you could do that for cannabis as well.
Real quick before you move on, that last picture, it showed a sign that, it said $3 pre-roll, I think $5 grams.
Yeah, I didn't even understand.
I
what that
think,
meant.
if I remember right, you can possess 2 pounds, is that right?
So
At your home.
2 ounces in public or 2 pounds at home.
So I did the math, 1 pound is 453 grams. 900 grams, which if you're selling for $5.
That's a lot of pot.
And that's why you can't get a license to grow it, doesn't make sense, because you can grow it and you can have 2 pounds at home. You have a ready supply.
It does seem like it's a fair amount, but that's the decision that was made. So
It
that's,
started at 5 pounds.
Yeah, I understand that. So I guess it went down.
so. Some limitations on
Another
it.
quick question. So you mentioned about the licensing and hey, somebody's going to apply to the state for a license. State's going to do background. They're going to contact the municipality. If a license is granted and there's really a good, reasonable objection, is there an appeal process?
I do not believe there is an appeal to granting a license. Again, they will contact the city before granting the license to ask if there are any objections, which presumably would then influence their decision on whether or not to grant the license. But I don't believe there is a
So
objection
they're gonna
process.
grant a license and a city's gonna have her say, some city says, we're only gonna allow 1 retail outlet. And they're gonna be granting 10 licenses.
No,
You know,
it's-
and it don't see,
Cities can limit it on population.
Yeah,
right, well, what I'm trying to say is that the OCM isn't necessary. They're gonna just keep granting licenses and,
well, so
No,
they'll
but it's full.
contact the city. So if they call the city and they say, we received a license application, and the city says, well, we've hit our 1 per 12,500 people, then presumably OCM would say, oh, good to know, thank you, we'll deny it. Because the city is allowed to license it specifically. So it's a 2-part. There's a license through the state, and then there is a registration at the local level, and the city can limit the number of registrations that it issues, and you need both to sell.
So one other thing that we'll have to have a conversation about is how quickly we act. So for instance, Dakota County has to have 36. Once you get to 36, but if we only have 4 businesses in Lakeville, we don't have to issue any more because the county has met the maximum. Like, for instance, I talked to West St. Paul and they said, we only need to have 2. But they're like, we assume there's going to be way more than 2 in West St. Paul. So part of it is like kind of watching what's happening in the market and how quickly we do this, because they may fill out the dance card before we meet our 7 licenses.
or 7 licenses. That is if you are going to limit it. I guess my thought process is that most of these people that think they're gonna do it are either gonna find it financially not able to meet all the rules to be able to sell, or they're just
Well, and that's
through
the,
good business, bad business practices, whatever, people just be.
well, that's to your point, is to say, if we have 7, because that's what we need to have for population, and there's 36 in the county and 3 go out of business, just like a garbage hauler, like when garbage haulers have gone out of business, we've just deleted that license. We haven't left it open. And so my opinion would be to follow a similar model.
As far as as a matter of practice, it's not clear how, if you wanted to sort of delay and see, what happens, it's not clear how that's actually going to happen in practice in terms of, does it just kind of depend on you know, if the first 7 applicants happen to be in Lakeville, you know, there's sort of not much the city could necessarily do about that. But it is potentially possible to, you know, if some of the other cities in the county go really nuts on it, you could potentially end up with fewer than 7 or even none.
The 36 that you talked about at Dakota County, did they already vote on that?
That's in law.
That's the law.
So it's
Oh,
based
that
on
is the
population.
law.
So
So
the,
it's strictly the law. The law is limiting it.
so the law says
You have to have it.
you can limit it as a municipality. So you can limit it to,
We have to have at least.
you have to have at least 1 per 12,500 residents. Or 1 per 12,500 residents countywide. So it's based on the county population. Or you could set no limit, or you could set a higher limit than your minimum. So Lakeville could decide you want, I can't remember if it's 6 or 7. 6.
You have 6 in the memo.
I think it's 6. Based on
Whatever 74,000 divided by 12 and a half.
5.9. I'm not that.
But the point is, the county doesn't set a maximum. The state says you have to have the opportunity for at least 36 in Dakota County. Once that's met, then other cities can say, you know,
We're at our max.
we're at
Does
our
the county have any role? It's just kind of a geographic thing.
Yeah, it's just kind of a geographic thing.
They license outside of city.
Yeah, so I mentioned there's these sort of local registrations. So the county will handle registrations for unincorporated areas, and the city could, if it wanted to, delegate that registration authority to the county. So there's everyone who's selling any of these products has to put their name on a list. By default, that list is the city's list, but you could also say, we don't want to care about it and give it to the county.
What's the yearly registration fee for the city?
So it depends on the kind of license. I believe for a full strength, exact dollar values, I think for a full strength license, it's $250 initial, $500 renewal.
Well, I saw 1,000 in there. I thought the renewal was just for the first half year.
It was odd, the renewal was
It
higher.
was,
So-
you had 500, the first year and 1,000 renewal or something like that.
So that's for the state license, and then the city can charge up to half of the state license fee.
Oh, the city could charge up to half.
And do we set that? So is that another thing we have to do?
Yeah, so that will be,
Part of our fee schedule.
Yeah.
So they're basically buying the state license and the city license.
yeah.
But
So-
they're paying twice. They're paying the state and then the city.
Yes.
Alright.
So there's also, in addition to sort of the full strength licenses, a lot of these requirements are sort of specific to the full strength. There's also the 3.2, the lower potency hemp, that's sort of the currently available 5 milligram gummies. That will continue largely without change for now. Starting in October, those will be registered with the Department of Health. And then eventually, likely early 2025, that will then be licensed by OCM with a local registration requirement. So there's sort of a transitionary regulation period. The low dose, it's much less restricted in terms of what and where you can sell. So that is any product that doesn't need a license or any product that you have the proper licensing for. So a vape shop or a tobacco shop could get a license for the lower potency hemp edibles, so the 5 milligram gummies or seltzers. And the lower potency specifically has on-premise consumption is sort of explicitly in the statute. So you can have, restaurants and bars can continue to serve the seltzers with a lot of very liquor-like restrictions in terms of you must have a designated premise and you can't take anything off of the premise and it has to be opened before you give it to them. And, sort of similar to serving someone a beer.
Sorry, can we jump back once to the consumption in public? How do they handle multi-tenant properties? So can you smoke pot in your apartment and bother your neighbor?
Yes. Same way you could smoke tobacco in your apartment and bother your neighbor.
It's a smoke designated smoke-free building.
Mhm.
So what are like the
The CDA properties are all smoke-free.
they are, okay.
And I think most apartment buildings are now too.
Okay,
But
So
don't they
that-
have designated smoking areas and don't they let them smoke on their porches?
It would depend building by building. I mean, I think Justin is right, you know, the CDA is gonna have stricter rules. It all depends on the management company. I think if you're not allowed to smoke in your unit, they'll, you know, patio or maybe there's some common space on the grounds that they allow smoking, but
I just, the
but it's
reason,
gonna vary by building.
to me, that's like the question now, and I think when projects come in to say, well, what's your policy on this before we approve your project? Okay, sorry.
I have another question too, just about the commercial regulations, 16 license types. For the cities, we've been talking about basically retail. But if somebody wants to cultivate, somebody wants to farm it, do we need to be prepared to regulate that too?
Yes, mostly through like a zoning concern, you know, it's gonna be an agricultural business, like sort of any other agricultural business. And so these businesses are all subject to sort of, you know, quote unquote, like ordinary zoning power. So you couldn't open, you know, a cultivation business in an R1 zoned district or anything like that. There are also, again, specifically cultivation is an area where there's lots of, the agency will make a rule in the statute. And so there will be rules about things like odor, water use, and security for those operations that we just don't know what they are yet.
But right now, like say some farmer wants to grow corn, they don't get a permit or register from us. But
Yeah.
if they wanted to grow marijuana, they would need to get a license or registration.
So they would need to get a license through the state. There is not an equivalent registration necessarily through, for the cultivators. The registration is mostly a retail thing.
Yeah.
But yes, there's a cultivator license through the state agency.
And that's what I was getting at. So we don't need to be prepared to have a
Just zoning.
licensing process, just the zoning for the cities.
Yeah.
We could make it a CUP. We wanted to.
So, Mayor, just for it to be aware for future conversation, when we get ready to talk about rules and regulations within the city, et cetera, my opinion is that we still live in America. Don't actually legislate for stupidity. So, people, in my opinion, can do whatever they want. They can drink too much if they want to, but they have to, they're obviously gonna get caught if they, you know, drive. There's, if a building allows, I guess what I'm saying is I'm more cautious on, I wouldn't deny a license just because you didn't like how they were going to operate their business. So, I mean, these are things that we can talk about when we have more time in the future, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that, and the staff a heads up, I'm not on the same page. I'm more free to live your life, or libertarian, I guess you could say, when it comes to certain things. So,
And for some of these concerns, you know, sort of an important, you know, backdrop to it is that they are also still subject to a lot of the sort of private, you know, inter-neighbor dispute resolution processes of anything else. So if someone is smoking up all the time and it's an unbearable odor for the neighbors, you know, it's the same way that if your neighbor was really bad at, you know, had a really bad compost heap and the odor was really unbearable, a lot of the same, you know, sort of private nuisance actions might apply to sort of let sort of community figure it out. So it's not a completely, you know, free to make your neighbor's lives hell kind of a situation.
But we also know how.
That's
hard
what my
those are.
husband
Those are
would
hard to
think, so.
enforce as well.
They are, they're
We know
very
that.
Yeah, I mean, there's difficulties, but it's,
But this is a whole different level that I think we aren't gonna know until it starts to happen. But this is a whole different level of odor. It's a whole lot, it's gonna affect people on a nuisance level. That's where my head is I'm thinking, okay, we're gonna have a lot of nuisance complaints that quite frankly, I mean, right now, we don't have a city ordinance. When this goes into effect, it's gonna be, and we don't have anything to enforce that nuisance. So for me, it's a balance between what you're saying, Michelle. Yeah, we don't want to sit there and legislate and something everybody, if everybody does it, but we also don't want to create this nuisance that we just can't help our citizens.
Those complaints will be starting very shortly, won't they?
Next week.
August 1st.
Was it, I thought it was July 1st.
So there's a bit of a confusion in the law. So the part that says it's legal takes effect July 1st, and the part that removes the criminal penalties for it takes effect August 1st.
Wow.
So they missed that in there.
So you could get arrested for a month and.
You'd have it.
And yet it's legal.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
In practice,
Yeah.
once it's legal, probably it's just legal, but they wanted it to take effect July 1st, and I think it was BCA just said like, we can't get the paperwork done that fast, and so they pushed the criminal portion of it to August 1st. Bit on this, but in terms of, what's left, it is, generally speaking, municipal regulation is pretty strongly preempted. It is mostly going to be, this is a decision that the state has made, and mostly it's going to be the state rules. And the city will have, frankly, fairly limited options if it wants to try and regulate some of these things. But there are still, some areas that are left. First big one is just zoning. These are businesses, as with any other type of a business, they have to comply with local zoning. And that applies to both the full strength and the lower potency, sort of an explicit condition on both of them that they follow, local zoning ordinances. We've seen, some places tend to do things as just sort of retail sales. Some communities do have, liquor store or tobacco store as like a separate, separately zoned use. We think by analogy, can do the same thing with a cannabis store, particularly with the lower potency. We're seeing some interest in regulating that as an accessory use. So that would be, limited to certain zoning districts and only if you are, sort of mostly a retailer of something else.
Can we do it by geography? To say, so we don't have 5 dispensaries at McStop. Can we say you can have a license? There's one here and there's one
The
here.
mile separation. or
Within a.
something.
Yeah, within like 2 miles of each other. Can we do that?
So this is starting to get into a bit of a gray area where it's not. So the language in the statute is reasonable restrictions on the time, place, and manner, which is a legal term of art from First Amendment speech regulation. So we're not quite sure exactly how that applies to, business zoning yet. It is explicitly mentioned in the statute that you can have setbacks of the businesses from schools or parks. It's not explicitly in there that you could have a, setback from other businesses. But our position has tended to be that if it's sort of a thing you could do generally with your zoning power, and it's not, capped or discussed in the statute, probably that remains as an existing power. So could probably set, a setback of, can't have a business within some number of feet.
Does the statute dictate that number of feet?
So it is 1,000 feet from a school or 500 feet from a daycare, residential treatment facility, or it's some convoluted phrase. It's feature at a park that is routinely used by children, something like that. But that basically means playgrounds.
Those are maximum setbacks.
Yeah. So that's the maximum setback is
So the daycare, that's 700 feet.
500 feet.
So it's like thinking of a Venn diagram. If you have a map of Lakeville and you have these circles about all those things, and it has to, the location has to match not being inside those circles plus being in a zone area.
Yes.
Most likely, I mean, if you think about our map, we don't have one here, but your C zones, your red zones on the zone, the staff is gonna start as a recommendation. I think the bigger question will be downtown. Some of the downtown zoning is based on the commercial district language. It doesn't have to be. I mean, we can specifically call this out, but if you limit it to the C1 or C2 or C3 districts and have the same restrictions that we we're just talking about, that does start to limit where it can go. Think your vape shops right now. I mean, that's probably the same type of place that's gonna have these. It's gonna be in your strip malls. It's gonna be, and most likely, a lot of the tenants or, just like you don't have two sandwich shops in the same center,
Exactly.
there's probably gonna be an exclusive agreement between, if somebody goes in, there's not gonna be two next to each other.
It's not usually, I mean, it's not like it's written in stone, but it's not good business practice to put two competing businesses in your same strip mall
Right.
when you're trying to collect rent from both of them, so.
Yeah,
A
but
lot
there's
of
two
them- a lot of them
CBD
have it-
businesses.
A lot of them have it built into their.
There's two CBD businesses downtown. I'm just saying it's not totally unheard of.
What's the second?
It's the other mainstream
Oh,
on Hall or whatever. Behind the CDA property, the mainstream CBD is there.
Well,
We're
And
at,
also
there's
just,
still so many, they're not that close. I'm talking about in the actual vicinity of the same leased
same
properties.
building.
Yeah, same buildings.
and one important caveat is something that we've, sort of a jurisprudence we've seen develop around setbacks for sort of other uses is, it can't be a de facto ban. Otherwise, courts tend to be a little more aggressive stepping in on those. Something we've seen particularly with, like sex offender living setbacks, is that there does have to be some availability for business. You can't just sort of
Oh, so
completely zone it out of the community, or it can get challenged as a sort of a de facto ban, and you're not allowed to ban it. So. So there is a specific moratorium authority within the new statute. So that's, sort of can put a pause on the issuance of any licenses or can last until January 1st of 2025. And so unlike sort of the standard zoning moratorium where it's 1 year from passage, with this one, it is whenever passed until January 1st, 2025. Although we're not sure they're going to be that useful in practice because they are limited to the full strength licenses, doesn't cover the lower potency. And OCM has already indicated that they're not going to be ready to issue licenses until, maybe March 2025 anyway. And you can't sell without a license. So if there's no licenses available, then there's also no sales. So there's not a whole lot of need for a moratorium. I just bring this up in case, in case the agency manages to find its feet ahead of schedule somehow. This is a power that would remain. And if we start hearing that they're going to open applications, much earlier than we were expecting, that's something we might want to revisit. But for right now, we don't see that there's a lot of utility in them. So like I mentioned, there's some specific zoning requirements. This is where the setbacks come to. There's also hours of operation. So there's sort of core hours that they have to be allowed to sell. They must be able to sell between 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. And then they cannot sell between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m., 10 a.m. on Sundays. It's a really convoluted way that they did this. I don't know why they thought this was the best way, but it's what they did. So for hours not listed there, so there's sort of the core hours they can sell, there's the core hours they can't sell. And then for anything else, the city gets to make a decision on if they're allowed to operate during those hours.
So it's not gonna be like liquor where the sales end at 1 AM unless you have a 2 AM license.
The city could potentially do something.
It'd be like our downtown patio, you know, it's a default of, what is it, 10 o'clock, but you can ask for a permit to go longer
Okay.
or a conditional use permit.
So will there be a definition of residential treatment facility coming out of OCM?
I believe that is defined in elsewhere instead. I think that's defined in the,
Does that go beyond a group home?
I don't believe a group home qualifies. I think that's more for like
Actual.
substance abuse, like treatment program.
We don't even know where all the group homes are.
I know, that's why I started like, we have a lot, you know, scattered everywhere in every city.
So like I mentioned, there's some limited city involvement in the licensing process. OCM, once they receive an application, they'll be calling the city to ask, you know, hey, we have a license application for this address. Does this comply with your zoning code? Do you have any particular concerns with this applicant, this location, any reason why it shouldn't go there? They are presumably then free to ignore that if they want to, but they do at least have to ask, and the city does then get the opportunity to provide it. Once they have a state license, then they still have to give a local registration. So this is all retail businesses, high potency, low potency, medical, a lot of them. There's not any discretion by the city. So there's 4 checkboxes. If they meet those 4 checkboxes, the city must issue the registration. If there's one available, there is an ability to restrict the number of those that are available. But if there's one available and they meet the requirements, then the city must issue it. There's also some registration fees. So I think I misspoke. So it is $500 initial and $1,000 renewal. And I think that is half of the state license fee. You know, all of these subject to, again, sort of future rulemaking in terms of the state statute sets an initial state license fee. And then OCM has, I believe, the rulemaking power to change that if they want to. And then the city, it's, I believe, the lesser of $1,000 or half the state license fee. Once we're back up, we can head to the next slide for enforcement and compliance. So like we mentioned before, can make use in public petty misdemeanor. There are some requirements some sort of compliance requirements that will be left to the city, particularly age verification. And then there's a sort of a limited list of the operational requirements in terms of making sure that there's no self-service or vending machines, making sure that, you know, they're only selling within the hours of operation they're allowed to sell, those sorts of things. And so that's the thing where the city must do at least 1 compliance check per year per license holder. Again, there are OCM, one of their mandates is to come out with a sort of standard operating procedure for how to do these checks. And there's some substantial financial aid as well. So not clear exactly how that's going to operate yet, but we anticipate that that will be pretty well settled by the state by the time we start having to do them.
It shouldn't be that much different than the tobacco and the alcohol.
It shouldn't be much different at all from a tobacco or alcohol compliance check. So, same kinds of things. And then, of course, I just to keep, on my other sort of theme is that they also have to comply with every other, ordinance. So if there's congestion, property damage, if they're not shoveling the snow, if they're being a nuisance in some other way, sort of all of the standard rules also apply to them. So if there are violations that get found as part of these compliance checks, so OCM has to set up a complaint process to report license violations, must give the cities an expedited complaint process. And if there is a health or safety potential problem, then OCM must respond in 1 business day or less if the city submits a complaint. So it's a fairly robust complaint process to sort of let the state know about these. All right. If there are license violations, again, the city can also suspend that local registration, which is necessary to have any sales. So that's if there's any violations of the state license requirements, or if there is, quote, an immediate threat to the health or safety of the public. It's not entirely clear what that is. We're anticipating something like, if there have been, repeat incidences of violence, repeat break-ins, repeat robberies, that kind of a thing. That is also grounds for suspension. The city can suspend for up to 30 days at a time. And then anything longer than that has to be a state decision. Must immediately notify OCM if there is any action taken. And then the state, I believe the state has a week to make its decision on that. So if you find, repeated violations, you can suspend for 30 days. You tell the state. If they say, yeah, this is really bad, the state can then decide to suspend for a year or even cancel the license. If someone has that suspension and they decide to ignore the city and just keep selling anyway, the city can impose a civil penalty of up to $2,000 per violation, which would be per sale if they continue to sell. So it's pretty meaty enforcement powers. And again, particularly with the cannabis businesses where they can't sell any other products, this is a complete shutdown of the business if you decide to suspend the registration. So, completely shuttering a business for 30 days is hopefully a pretty robust compliance tool.
I'm sorry to check on that. Could you, I'm not suggesting we do this, but like in our ordinance, we have a 3-step process. I think it's 3. If you violate liquor or tobacco violations, first one is usually a fine. Then if it's within a year, it's a day violation or a day suspension. Could we, if we wanted to, do something similar here, but just the biggest penalty couldn't be more than 30 days? So like the first violation could be a warning, second, a week. I mean, this is kind of the maximum penalty, right?
Yeah, this is the maximum. I actually would recommend having some kind of a, default or recommended schedule set up in the ordinance, similar to, there was a court case recently involving the city of St. Paul's schedule, and they have it set up by, sort of type of violation, number of violations within a time period. They have a grid. And then as long as that's a, sort of the recommended or presumptive penalty, something like that would probably be a good idea. There's an appeal mechanism in state statute for state licensing actions. There's not necessarily anything explicitly there for a city action, but, shutting a business down for 30 days is still fairly substantial. We would recommend, to avoid, a due process or takings claim in court, we would recommend setting up some kind of an appeal mechanism, whether that's to, a mediator or to the city council, similar to like you do with liquor or tobacco. license violation. Could be the same process even, but just setting up something in city code for that. So the most exciting part, of course, is the taxes, always. So the law contains about $70 million in state appropriations for an initial funding to sort of get the program off the ground. Long-term, there's a 10% sales tax on gross receipts of all the products at all levels. It's a fairly hefty sales tax, but compared to other states, it's actually somewhat low. So what some other states have done is they've started low to try and quash the black market and then gone higher over time. We might see that, but there's not a schedule in the statute or anything. Right now, it's just, we're gonna do 10%. And then,
10% over the regular 7?
Yeah.
It says 18.
17 and a quarter under.
Yeah.
so it is a specific 10% separate new sales tax on these products. That money is sort of broken down to general revenue, and there's a local government aid account, which then gets broken down into counties and cities. It works out to 1% of gross sales of all products across the state will go to helping cities. So it's a fairly substantial amount of support. It'll be portioned out by sort of a pro rata share of the number of licenses in each city. But again, it should be a fairly substantial amount of assistance and should cover, it's expected to be sort of at least self-supporting in terms of the compliance and licensing requirements.
So you're saying that 1% would offset if you had to hire somebody specifically with their duties as being dealing with OCM, et cetera?
Yeah, so that's the idea, or to pay for, police officer time when they're going to do these compliance checks, the extra training requirements.
City clerk time and issuing licenses.
So a part of that, of course, there are the license for the issuing the registrations. There's the direct fees that you take from the businesses, and then there will also be this state aid, not 100% set yet exactly how this is going to be. So it has to be 1% of total sales must be collected and distributed directly to cities for local assistance. In terms of exactly how that money gets spent, that's going to be more of like an OCM sort of decision on how much goes to training versus staff time versus sort of new positions.
So there's no rule right now saying that we're going to give you 1% and it has to go, X% of that needs to go to enforcement, X% it needs to go to.
There's no rule. So right, it's just must give cities 1%. And then
we can decide from there how to spend that.
You could potentially decide OCM might make more rules about how they're going to earmark it. But
Sounds all right.
or what kind of grants they're going to have available or something like that. But they can't go below that 1% of sales.
Can we hire somebody that would do the nuisance checking versus sending a police officer?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of cities have
Code enforcement.
code enforcement officer, or some cities it's someone on the fire department staff or public works staff who's sort of the point person for city code or nuisance enforcement.
So we do now. I mean, we don't send cops on nuisance stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just somebody mentioned it and I just thought, well, I really would hate to tie up a police officer's time with these calls when we have so many more important things.
1% distributed to cities based on the percentage on how many sellers are in the city, right? So
Yeah,
how much that really, is that gonna be,
It's not gonna be a ton.
it's not gonna be an FTE.
No,
So
it's not gonna be windfall.
there may be a portion of someone's
Yeah,
FTE or a special assignment.
Well, you would hope that whoever is having to deal with stuff is only a portion of their job.
So the one thing that you didn't cover that they also talked about at LMC was the event permitting and that the cities can regulate no consumption during an event. Is that accurate?
I believe that is true. Yep. So there are cannabis event licenses. There's a little bit more ability to have local control over those kinds of things. I believe the city can even decide to not have events.
Okay, that'd be good.
Misunderstood that. I thought we had to.
My understanding was that it was more of an opt-in than like retail sales.
Sure.
But again, a lot of this is sort of still waiting on OCM to come out with more of their rules and regulations.
Yeah, could like somebody sell it at the farmer's market?
No. So you can't have a sales license for like a mobile, or I guess you could probably have a part-time, but it has to be for like a particular business. Yeah.
There's only delivery. And that's for sure. It has to be very, no markings, and you have to have 2 employees for weed delivery.
And no tasting.
They know
events or anything.
No, so there can be like sort of fests or events at which there can now then be on-site consumption. But in general, like you can't just go into the store and taste or sample. It's not like with the tobacco store where you can, sample by sitting on a couch and smoking a cigar. At the dispensary, you're not allowed to have any amount of use or consumption on site.
Okay.
So
I would just say for us, the way that I see this wrapping up, that we need to, in the media, talk about tobacco in parks and petty misdemeanor, then more long-term zoning, hours, event permitting, and fee schedule. Did I miss anything?
so yeah, we can let's skip ahead a couple of slides here, wrapping up. One more. Yeah, so we have kind of our recommended list of ordinances that we would say, should set up for, things like hours of operation, setting up that local registration, compliance checks, suspension and appeal mechanisms. I guess I haven't been as aware of the events, but if that's something we're interested in, that's definitely something we can put together a more robust ordinance on. And then fees, zoning, use, and then again, the moratorium, if desired, we don't necessarily feel that it's worth it, but if it's a position the city wants to stake out, then that's, a power that's available.
If we don't call out cultivation of cannabis, would there be an argument that would just fall under agriculture? Like if a city just allows, would it just fall under that?
Yep. So there is a state license for cultivation. So commercial cultivation won't be able to start until there's, again, licenses available in probably 2025. But
We'll have to look at that though, because we have some very residential, plots of corn right now. I mean, I'm thinking about off of County Road 50, that plot of land that just continues to grow corn every year.
But personal cultivation could happen. I mean, that's just basically existing ordinances. So that might be the more pressing one.
Yeah, July 1st, you can have 8 plants. So it does have to be
Locked up and something like that.
locked up. It has to be, locked and out of view of the public.
So it's
Can't be
basement.
growing outside is what you're saying.
It's been a greenhouse.
Yeah, in a greenhouse or a cage in the backyard or something to that effect.
So we can put parameters though on structure size probably.
Yeah, so
Like
there's
accessory, so that's another conversation.
Mhm.
Just like chicken coops are.
I mean, we have that statute or code already on
Yeah.
accessory structures.
Okay, so we just have to put that in there. Or is that just considered
So it would just be an accessory structure.
Okay.
If you, whatever parameters you have on sheds already would also apply to the shed you'd need to grow your cannabis in.
But you also can think of some properties that say abut, they're surrounded on three sides by just woods or something like that. I mean, they could theoretically grow in their backyard out of public view.
Privacy blocks for privacy fence.
So privacy fence.
Something tells me though, if you're growing, you're probably gonna want to do it year round.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not gonna grow well outside
Not
in
here.
this climate. It's the indoor, the grow light. that- I mean, even the urban agriculture ones that are popping up in Minneapolis, I actually ended up touring one. And it was all controlled, it's these tents up to the ceiling and it's all temperature control. I mean, I don't think you could do that outside here.
The way the regulations or the statute is sort of set up, it does seem like it is anticipated that it will mostly be indoor cultivation. There's, and because you also then have to have, access controls. So you'd have to have a 10-foot security fence around your entire farm field. That really starts to add up.
So we could end up with a warehouse wanting to do it.
Mhm.
Did they come up with the 4 plants because that will yield 200 pounds?
Not two.
Oh,
Just-
2 pounds. Sorry.
It's 8 plants, but 4.
Regional
homegrown.
distribution.
It's really weird.
8 plants, 4 of which can be mature at any time. So I guess you can grow 4, and when they're almost ready, you can start the next 4, and then harvest, and the next 4 are almost ready again, or however you want to
So it's not a perennial.
do it. It's kind of
Like corn, you gotta harvest it and you're done.
it's my understanding.
Be an educational experience for everybody.
So I think we recently approved hemp registrations for 6,
THC, yep. The edibles.
the edibles
Yeah.
for 6. It seems like there are some businesses that are trying to plant some roots. I don't know if they plan to convert or apply for a higher type of license. What is the process for converting or being able to, I know you said you can't do 2 types of businesses or something like that, but could you completely stop one type of business and apply for a permit that changes your type of?
I believe so, yes. I don't know that will guarantee or even necessarily help with
Having an
your,
established business. already?
yeah, like actually getting the license from
Okay.
the state.
They can have edibles and the low, they can have edibles and the high, right? They can have 2,
So
you said up to 6 different licenses, right? One person or one business.
I believe one person can have 5 retail licenses, but not for the same.
I think she's asking, could a cannabis shop sell low and high potency?
Yes, so a cannabis store could sell low and high potency. But then they're covered by the cannabis store. They
Right.
can't really sell anything else.
Right. 'Cause I
Where a
think
low potency could be sold at Quick Trip.
Yeah.
is there an argument about whatever the council ends up going, in whatever direction we end up going with restrictions and whatnot, but is there an argument to be made about hardship to a business if an existing business is restricted from doing something that the state has permitted, but the city doesn't due to setback rules or zoning ordinances to a business that already exists for a similar product?
Well, for example, like if Remedy doesn't move, they would be within 500 feet of High Point. So they would be out of compliance. So you're harming them, but that's the license. So they wouldn't get a license.
You have to find the,
That would be a state regulation.
But that's a state,
that's already in the statute.
is that
Well,
the
so
they're kind
the-
of using? That's
so
just,
the-
Yes.
The city can pass that 500-foot setback. So it's not automatic already. So the city can set that up.
Oh, I thought the state had.
I thought the state.
It's a maximum.
The city can.
So yeah, that's the maximum the city can do is
Oh, so it's
1,000
not-
feet.
It's not.
So does the state have any setback regulations? So it's all.
That's all the
This is
city.
what the maximum is.
I'm saying our conversations are going to have impacts on businesses that
Right.
currently exist.
Right.
So are those,
If they want to
Convert.
convert to the.
Right.
Yeah.
higher code.
Which is why it'll be important to have the public hearing, which is required for the zoning ordinance.
And so I guess that was part of my question too. So we said 6 is what we currently have registered for THC.
I think, yeah.
and those
But
are,
we
those
don't
are
limit
current,
those.
We don't limit those.
but just practically that's what you, and those are currently selling the,
Gummies.
at the gummies, okay.
Yeah, vape shops, CBD.
Yeah, I have no idea if those businesses will choose to apply for a state permit for these other products, but it
Yeah.
just seems to me that would make sense. If
It would make a logical.
But they would have to stop selling other things. I mean, they could be, like Quick Trips couldn't have
Right.
that license.
Even remedies.
Even Remedy Bar.
Yeah, they would have to have
So,
a separate business of just cannabis, because they wouldn't be able to do all the other stuff that they sell, right?
It's more about them deciding
What they want to
kind
do.
of business.
Mhm.
And then one individual could have 6 retail establishments, but only 1 per city?
5.
I don't know as clearly the,
that's how I understand.
And do they just get around that by setting up separate LLCs? I mean.
well, so that's what
I
we're gonna
know-
have to see. Like, it doesn't take that much to incorporate a new LLC, but that's the way it's written, at least, is, and it's written as, sort of per license holder, so I don't know if there will be, you'll have to give them your actual name and the state will limit it by that.
Well, could the father own a retail and the daughter owns cultivation?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
So you're vertically integrated in your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have 15 kids, no, I'm kidding.
One
Each
free
we
license
get-
type,
Yeah, each we get a different license.
So, Mayor, a lot of this we have some time on. The one thing that, like you mentioned, is the August 1st, whether or not, August 1st will start to be not criminal to use, unless the city wants to do a ordinance saying that you can't use it in public.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to have a conversation about putting some parameters on public use. Because if that's gonna be the standard when it's,
Hearing on that.
Well, it's an ordinance, so it would require a 10-day notice, and your policy kind of is if you have an ordinance that it at least be under new business, it doesn't have to be a public hearing. It would be under new business,
It would, but it would,
public consumption.
because already in the statute, is what I heard was in the statute, it's illegal, but there's no penalty.
Yeah.
So what we would be doing is providing a level of penalty, which would be a petty misdemeanor. So it wouldn't be like the state doesn't restrict you using it in public, and we're restricting you using it in public. It's the same as you use it in public in Lakeville, it's a petty misdemeanor.
because we're
I-
designing around what it'll be like in 2025.
But I thought your conversation was about whether or not in public would be in our parks.
Right.
And if we were going to enforce that on August 1st,
Yeah, we gotta get rolling.
so.
It doesn't have to be by August 1st. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
on August 1st, it's
Right.
legal
Yeah.
use.
I know, but it's gonna happen in the parks.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, that's gonna be the obvious place that it's gonna
And
take place.
The way it's sort of defined in the statute is in the parks is in public, and so use in a public park would be prohibited because it's not, a private residence or a sort of access controlled private property. And then the question is there a penalty associated with that?
Oh, so on August 1st, they can't smoke in the park.
But there's no
But
penalty.
there's no.
But yeah, but by default, there's no penalty for it.
Oh,
So we
so
could-
we don't have to make the determination whether you're gonna smoke in the park.
That-
You wanted to
want
add in tobacco to that.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. We're just saying, yeah, the state says you can't smoke it.
Sometimes I'm not on the same.
Yeah, so I see a penalty for public consumption because there isn't one. And then I think we should have a broader conversation about tobacco use in the parks at the same time.
To that, yes, back in the day.
How often are the parks monitored for enforcement?
It's gonna be a nuisance thing.
Be on a complaint basis, or is the police are patrolling.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's at, Orchard Lake Beach Park by themselves,
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be the same way that parks are patrolled for smoking marijuana and drinking right now.
Okay.
That was the reserve's main duty when we were on.
Was going around the parks.
Visited every park.
Gotcha.
The other thing I might encourage, sort of moving a little faster on would be if you want to put some zoning restrictions on the lower potency sales. Anything high potency, you've got time because the agency won't be issuing licenses for a while. But if you wanted to do setbacks, accessory use, conditional use for those lower potency sales, by default, those are going to start being allowed sort of July 1st or soon. Do you have a local registration requirement already?
We do.
So that will continue until preempted. There's some lively debate going on right now about is that October or is that when OCM starts to issue licenses? So at least till October, you've got that, but I would recommend starting to think about where you want these things to go long-term.
that
So,
just seems like standards commercial district.
In the downtown discussion.
we have THC, CBD that we just did. We did not include restrictions on distances from schools, churches, daycares. So
We had a conversation about that.
we did. I'm trying to figure out the level here. So you have CBD, THC, and then you have low potency cannabis, and then you have high potency cannabis.
So the THC, the previous bill about THC has just been sort of completely subsumed into this.
Yeah.
So right now there's CBD and then there's lower potency or hemp and then there's cannabis. Gonna be kind of the three levels.
So the licenses that we're doing right now are the CBD. Right?
THC.
It's THC derived from hemp and not from cannabis.
Yeah, so that's has become
But
lower
it's
potency
now
now.
low, but
Right.
But that's declared, that's what's low potency. What we're currently,
The 5 milligrams and below.
Yeah.
Right.
Is low potency.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out is, are we already covered for the THC, CBD, low potency and what we have in our zoning right now?
I mean, it sounds like it. If it's a 5 milligram.
We just don't have a distance requirement there.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was because the 5 of us said we didn't want to.
Right. And I don't know if the cannabis part changes that thought or not. I mean, that's up to you guys.
so that again, that'll be a separate store.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The low potency.
No.
The high potency will be a separate store.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm saying,
could there be 5 milligram THC derived from cannabis?
Is just cannabis.
Okay, so would that fall under, or milligram fall under the stores we're already regulating?
So
Where maybe we
the,
do want to think about restrictions on location? Am I making sense?
yes, so the way they've defined it, so to be one of the lower potency hemp licenses, it has to be both lower potency and from hemp.
Okay.
And so if it is higher potency or not from hemp, then it is a cannabis product and you need a cannabis license from
Okay.
OCM. So that is not, a 2025.
Okay.
And aside from like the dosages per package, the low, it's my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, the low potency is 0.3 milligrams THC in the plant, correct? It's a
I think it's
level,
0.3% dry weight, I think.
yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
So it's not necessarily, the low potency doesn't necessarily involve the packaging and so much per square and so much per package. It's about,
Well, so it's both.
yeah,
So it's low potency, which means not more than 5 milligrams per serving. And I forget exactly what I think maybe 25 milligrams per package or something to that effect. And that all has to have come from a hemp plant which means below some sort of percentage or the 0.2%.
Just trying to get it straight in my mind. So if you had a dose that was more than a certain percentage
In the plant.
in the plant, regardless of how you packaged it, that would be the high dose.
Yeah. So if you sold a 1 milligram dose from cannabis, that is still cannabis. That still requires the full strength retail license.
Okay.
So then we are covered.
We should be covered then.
So we're covered in the THC CBD ordinance that we passed a
Yeah,
few
the
months
low
ago.
potency we're covered.
Low potency, we're covered. So really, it's the misdemeanor or how you want to enforce it being used in the public.
Okay,
So public would include anybody walking down the sidewalk.
Yep.
So do you want us to bring an ordinance back for your consideration on that?
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be a situation where you go to some of these other cities, it's the Wild West.
Mhm.
And anywhere you go outside stinks.
Do you want us to include tobacco for the park section of that? Or is that a separate discussion?
I think that might have to be a separate discussion.
I don't know if I will support anything unless it's all combined.
Okay,
Do you,
Combined or consistent, is that what you mean?
Consistent, yeah. It doesn't have to be one ordinance, but I'd like to see these as consistent policies that we have on.
So clarification on that would be, you would want a fine or some kind of misdemeanor for the use of cannabis in city parks or public areas. Do you want also a similar fine for use of tobacco and vaping, or do you just want to make tobacco and vaping illegal without a fine? Public places.
well, be careful. Remember, we're talking two different things here. I don't think we can prohibit smoking on the sidewalk.
yeah, just public, just like the
I was
parks.
talking about,
Yeah,
so there's two different things here.
Yep, so
We
parks.
can prohibit, as I understand it, the use of cannabis in public spaces, which includes parks
Yes.
and everything else. We can't do that for tobacco.
Right.
I mean, that's more of a policy decision for parks.
right.
Mhm.
So do you want an ordinance around the parks, part of that for tobacco use, or do we just want it as a policy?
I will just say
It'd
that,
have to be an ordinance.
yeah, the casual conversations I had in Duluth with area council and mayors is that did not have tobacco-free zones in parks, and they were going to pursue it. So I don't think that we're gonna be an anomaly.
Is the thought that it's just more consistent for enforcement?
Yep, it's just, then nobody can be like, oh, this is tobacco, it's not, whatever.
We're saying one product's legal, but they're both legal, but you
Right.
can't use one.
Right,
So
so it's
if you're
just
gonna say they're both
consistency
legal,
across the board.
Just because there's no way, the smell of marijuana is always so different from tobacco that you would never be able to determine if it was in like.
Vaping,
a
probably not,
little
that's the
clear.
challenge. Because most vaping is odorless.
I come at it more from just public health. I mean, secondhand smoke of anything is not usually healthy, regardless of if it's CBD, tobacco, or vaping. So and from an enforcement standpoint, I think it's helpful.
Well, and the other thing too is it helps consistency for school property, right? Because, you can play T-ball in a school park and not have tobacco, and you could play T-ball in a Lakeville park and have tobacco right now. So then you're becoming more consistent on your outdoor property as well. So yeah, I guess we have that conversation too. An ordinance,
Do you want us to bring that to the July work session,
yes.
which is July 24th? It won't be able to be approved effective August 1. but
Yeah.
We can turn it around pretty quickly after that. The first meeting in December.
Let's see. Okay. Maybe I should ask you earlier. We're talking a lot about parks over here.
I mean, it's not uncommon to go around and see parks that are tobacco-free
Mhm.
zones.
Yeah,
It was a pretty big thing 15, 20 years ago. There's a pretty big push on that.
I think there's a standard sign I've seen.
There is.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for all your
Yeah.
time and questions.
First week I started here as park and rec director, someone came in and asked about that.
Hey, Jack.
Really?
Jack.
Okay.
God
Do we-
keeping us all straight.
I do my best.
It won't be the last time we call you, I'm
Do
sure.
we want to quickly jump to the park stuff so John doesn't have to
Yeah.
stick around, or do you want to sit through the rest? We've got about,
Well,
Well,
we
we've
still
got-
have all the other legislative stuff to do. Yeah, we did this one because we knew it would be the longest.
there's a list of probably 15 of them.
Yeah, I can zip through this pretty quick.
Yeah, let's, if everybody's okay, let's do John, then we can take a 5-minute break and then we'll wrap up
Okay.
this. That's okay with
Yeah.
everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll need that break after.
Yeah, okay.
And
Just saying.
I'm sure I'll have it before then.
Okay.
It sounds like they want just a misdemeanor, so that should be
Very good.
Skipping the rest of the notice.
We're coming back to it after.
We're gonna do John, and then we'll go back to the,
Very good. Well, thank you for your time tonight to give you an update on our park bond referendum projects. As Mayor and Council know, is November 2021, when the Lakeville citizens approved a $8 million park bond referendum. In your packet on the screen are the 9 projects that we are going to complete as a result of that referendum. I'll give you an update on each one of those, but you can see it starts off with basketball courts and you got Antlers Community Park in there and trail gap connectivity, and it ends with East Community Park Phase 2. So just a little update on our basketball court repairs. You can see that we replaced 6 basketball courts. These were asphalt courts, and we reconstructed them in concrete. These will last probably 50, 60 plus years if all goes well. And when it comes to asphalt, you can see what happens there. And about every 7, 8 years, we have to resurface that, So that's cost. And then over time, you basically have to replace that asphalt as well. So the picture to your right is actually at Bassett Park. We did Bassett, Foxborough, Highview, Rolling, Green Ridge, and High Point. And this one, we actually striped a little pickleball court too on the west side there, because the residents reached out right before we were going to construct it and said, hey, we'd be willing to put in a little portable net if you put in a little court there. And that's what we did. And I had some feedback just this last week that they are using that, and I've driven by there and seen their little net. So that was completed in 2022. Then moving on to the Art Center improvements. This basically is complete, a few small punch list items, but this has been completed in the last 30 days. We've talked about this before. We have that loading dock on the west end of the Art Center. And then we also were able to construct a new office in there as well. Joe has had some major productions here in the last couple months, and he's really liking the loading dock. Obviously, the theater group or a band can just pull right up there. There's a dock there, it brings it right up to stage level, and they can roll their equipment and instruments right onto the stage there. And we also can bring in some heavy clay that Joe has had to walk in the past. So it's really helpful. I think I shared with you at a quarterly report, I don't know if in the last year, that years ago, Lori Line played here, and our guys had to bring her piano up the stairs in between Joe and Carla's office, and one gentleman got injured as a result of that. So this is also, an amenity that will prevent some injuries as well. So that turned out nice, and that one is done. Ritter Cabin, this last week, the exterior was stained. This picture was a couple weeks back, and the interior is pretty much stained as well. We have a little supply chain issue still out there with an electrical panel. Been waiting about 5-6 months on that. So we've been using some portable power out there. So that slowed us down a little bit. As you recall, and as I mentioned in the past, the Lakeville Lions donated $26,000 for some native landscaping that will go around the building. So they'll help us plant and provided the dollars to make that happen. So we're hoping this will be completed here in the month of July. Again, we're kind of waiting on that panel. And then when I was talking with Susan Johnson here today, we thought maybe we'd do the ribbon cutting and maybe opening ceremony maybe in September, more of a fall event.
Oh, nice.
And we'll give you maybe a date in a couple of weeks here that you can put on your calendar. And I think that'd be kind of neat to have a fall event out there and some activities. Then moving on to Antlers Park, this aerial photo you've probably seen. I think I shared it with you in the last couple days here, but you can see on the left how the parking lot is shaping up and the entrance and our little roundabout. And from the lakeside, you can see that our wall was completed by Friedrichs Landscaping. That was kind of their project, most of that wall. And then you can kind of see the pads that are forming, the concrete pads for picnic tables and shelters and bike racks. And then we also started the flat work for the pavilion, waiting on some of that, the block there to start taking that out of the ground. And at the end of the week, Thursday or Friday, they're planning on putting the first layer of asphalt on the lot. So you could see that possibly complete already by the end of the week.
What, how many parking spots?
We have 215 currently at the existing one, well, before we took it out, and then we're gonna be about 315. So it's about a little over 100 more stalls will be at this versus the previous one.
John,
Yeah,
it looked like that was new sand. Did we improve the sand on the beach?
actually, that just came out of because that we brought some of that material in because if you saw that how when we dug down, we were able to find some sand material. So I think they just spread a little bit of out there for the project. So I think it was on site that we brought it in. I can check in to find out if we brought some other product out, but I thought it was just internal stuff. That we were able to
It looked like it was freshly graded.
Yeah,
out there.
yeah, spread it out a little bit. Since this is working, just flip on, any other questions on Antlers? If not, we'll go over to Posse multi-use pavilion here. So Joe Bergquist is running with that project, and I shot him a quick email today, and he said, yes, that is still scheduled to be completed by the 1st of January.
Some cars outside.
Yeah, yeah, so that was a picture of construction probably 10 days ago or so. So that's moving on as well. So again, that will hopefully January of 2024, that will be completed. Our trail gap connectivity, there's like 6 major segments that we were going to construct as part of the referendum project. We're going to do 4 this year. The 2 that we will not complete is the furthest one to the north was the section of Highview. And then also on Cedar Avenue by the mobile home park there. Those are 2 some challenging design features on that. So we wanted to just take a little time to do the right, come up with the right plan there. The county's going to be paying for about, I think, 85% of the one on Cedar. So we're working with them on that. They had some comments on how they wanted to do that. So 4 of the 6 will be completed this year and the other 2 next year. And if you happen to drive by, Heritage Center up on Holyoke Highway, you're going to see the base, or they've actually graded in where these trails are going to go. So that's moving along. And then moving on to some park ID sign replacements. A couple weeks back, you guys approved a agreement with Prairie Lake Landscape to replace and install 39 signs in our system. So we're systematically going to make that happen this year. We said contractor, you can have all year and finish it up in the fall, so they can kind of sprinkle it in between projects they have. Prairie Lake Landscape is working with a local carpenter to put the signs in themselves. Prairie Lake will do the base work with the keystone and the plantings, and then another gentleman that's in town here will actually do the installation of the signs, and that will be completed by this fall.
I didn't know that Parks actually had an address.
Pardon me?
I didn't know that Parks had an address. I saw on the
Yeah,
new
yeah.
Cherry View sign,
Yeah.
so that might be helpful for.
I thought it was nice because I thought, oh yeah, I suppose you can put it in your GPS and find which park you're supposed to be at.
And this was the original master plan for Avonlea Community Park. This was done, if you recall, back in 2018. And you can see we had about 6 athletic decks facing more east-west, 8 pickleball courts, half basketball, some parking, splash pad, storage building down there, along with a playground. And then as you move to the east there, you have the baseball field. So now as we get into the design and look at the topography and get a little more detail, this is where we're at now. So just some changes I'll point out, we've moved the pickleball courts a little bit to the west. We've added 2 courts. We also, as you move kind of to the west or to east, this is a future space for a skate park. And I think that's something, we'll build this thing and that's something maybe our civic organizations can contribute to at a later time. We actually get a few requests every year on the skate park. Yeah. And, you have to find the right spot, and we think this is the right spot. And I think that'd be a fun little project in the years to come where we can bring in a consultant and maybe have a team, ask the kids out there, the users to participate in the design of it. Because I think the last thing you want is to build something and 2 weeks later they're bored with it. So you want some, good features there. And then as you go to the east there, you're getting up your playground, splash pad, that, as you know, the Lions are going to donate $500,000 towards. And then just east of that is you have your challenge course, and I'll show some pictures of that. And then just below that is our 2 athletic decks, and you can see how we're proposing to put a cricket pitch in there. So we're in between the fields and the out of bounds for soccer. The plan is to put the pitch in there. And then if they reserve this, no soccer, no football, no lacrosse, but then they can have this field for cricket. And we're working with some folks that can help us design that. We've talked to some other cities and some folks in town that play it on a regular basis. There actually is a pickup cricket game every Friday night if anyone wants to participate in Village Creek. We've been invited there to go watch this, and I'll have to do that so I understand the game a little better. So it's very popular.
Well, the ones around here, they can do in the afternoon, but I feel like the real tournaments are days long, right? Don't they?
Yeah. So I think some folks are going to be excited about this, and I think, they've had some games on our fields now. They'll play in our infield, like gravel infields, and make it happen. This is obviously the next step up. And I'm learning it could be a tennis ball. It could be a tennis ball wrapped in tape, or your professionals are got all the garb on and it's a hard ball. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of varieties of this.
So then you actually need both fields
with that
to be able to do correct.
Yeah, with that field there, which is, I think I'll call it their deluxe field. It's not half court, so to speak, or this is what they would need of the dimensions to have a full-fledged cricket game.
It was a really cool job.
Yeah.
Really
Good job.
Yeah.
That's great.
Besides the pitch,
Yeah.
did you have to do any grading changes with this larger field? Because usually in between lacrosse fields, isn't there somewhat of a ditch or something?
Yeah, so at times you'll have a little swale in between some fields just to get water out of there, but in this case, we'll have to keep it flat. I mean, with all your fields, you're gonna want a little crown, yep, to get the water off. And I'm sure we'll have to work that out here. But that is the plan.
Gotcha.
And so that's exciting. It's always exciting to put some new amenities in, something different, right? You're always looking for something different.
John, that pitch area, that's
Yeah.
actually concrete, right?
Yeah.
So
This one would be a concrete one. That's why we put it in the out of bounds. So yeah. Yeah.
That's what the baseball field.
What's about it?
That's what the baseball field.
Well, I'm gonna get to that right now. Alan. You're going from west to east. So that baseball.
Easy answer for baseball.
Yeah, I can see. I didn't know he was into
Baseball.
So, so we are, this is part of the plan is to build a baseball field there. About 18 months ago, I remember Dave said, hey, when you guys are start designing the baseball field, let us know, because we might want to think about, enhancing it, if it's, if it's something they want to think about. So we're in some preliminary discussions on that. Our plan calls for like 350 to 400 aluminum, stands and a dugout that's chain link with a wooden roof. Maybe they want, the block dugouts. Maybe they would like to have a roof on the structure. So we're discussing that with them, and as we progress, we'll let the mayor and council know about that. So
Any potential for lights?
yeah, so all these fields are lit, all these fields are irrigated, and where needed, drain tile, which is nice, right? Because when you looked at King back in the day, you probably didn't have the money. We had to come back later and put the lights in. We came back later to put the irrigation in. We came back later to put the drain tile in. So this is going to be all done at one time.
What is terraced spectator seating area? So is it just the hill?
Yeah.
Or there's like
Nope.
divots in the hill?
No, at this time, it's just it's just a slope that goes up.
Okay.
And what I look at that is I think that's, if you ever watched the Little League World Series, and those kids are running down, not that they could do it here, I mean, they could, grab some cardboard or a gunny sack or whatever, and they're out in the center field and they're zipping down there. How cool would this be? You ride your bike, you just pull on over, you can sit out there and watch a game on a Friday or Sunday night. And, it's kind of similar to what you have at Casperson Park, where you just sit on the side of the hill and watch a performance. I think that's gonna be really.
Steve Machad Park's like that with the baseball field.
Yeah,
It's-
yeah.
You can sit on a hill.
Yep, you could. And on that note, I get, for some reason, we built that center field at 410 feet. This is 380 and down in the center and 330 looks like down the lines. And, LBA's liking that because that 410's a poke. I'm not sure how many 15 or 16 rolls are 410, so. Yeah, so you can see the trail connectivity there. I mean, it's coming along nice. We also are looking at, if it works out, using the stormwater pond water to, using the splash pad, take that water, put it into the stormwater pond, and then use that to irrigate the fields. So that is the plan. We got, we got to get into the details on that, but that's our vision.
What's the timing on punching 185th Street through?
This year, from Dodd to Highview.
Yeah, but I mean, to Cedar.
Well,
It's on, it's
that's-
all the way to Cedar now.
But I mean, but this year it'll punch from Dodd to what?
Highview.
And what's that other road there, Amber?
Oh,
This is,
185th will go from Cedar all the way to Scott County.
It will, okay. Yeah, but I was wondering, what's this year? Oh, okay, I thought it was
Yeah.
like timed out longer. Okay, cool.
Now, what's the potential on that baseball field for Lakeville to invite or to get a baseball team like,
Yeah.
Northfield Knights, Dundas
Yeah.
Dukes, Maryville Mets, Mud
yeah,
Hens?
that's part of the discussion with LBA. Right now, I mean, if we can take this to a level that, a town team, right?
Yep.
The Meesvilles, yeah, the Elkos, the New Markets and so forth. That's the vision. Get in the DRS league, you know what I mean? And then your players that are going to New Market and Elko, these high school kids / college kids could stay home. Not that this is the pros or anything, but I think, when you talk to LBA, it's like, it'd be kind of fun to have the hometown boys here, girls playing here versus Elko New Market. Now, my guess is Elko New Market ain't gonna like that if we have this field because that's where the players are coming from. But that's, I think this town field, if you could get that, it just goes with every survey we do. What do they say?
Yeah.
It's a small town field with 75,000 people.
Yeah, imagine having a town ball team with
Yeah.
75,000.
Yeah.
I would think there would be enough players
Oh, yeah.
that they could field
Yes.
both Elko
Yeah.
Market and
Yeah.
Lakeville.
How big, and maybe you don't know this, how big is a high school field? So like the Blanchard pool last week now has single and double A boys and girls section
Mhm.
and conference meets.
Mhm.
So they picked up like 8 big meets now
Mhm.
from Rochester.
Mhm.
Could this take like section 1AA for baseball and softball and?
The vision is that would be the case. If we
Yeah,
can build
okay.
it right, and get it to that level, we could see that, they could see LBA, that you could have high school section tournament here or something, you know what I mean? And you can imagine if we build this, South and North are gonna wanna play here,
Yeah.
at least against each other, and they're probably gonna be, if this turns out, this next level,
Mhm.
there's probably gonna be a demand, hey, can we play there at certain times? So that's kind of exciting to see.
Cool.
And, again, another vision would, maybe we could, sell burgers, brats and beers from here, out of here too, just like you at the Meesvilles and, markets and everywhere else. So.
So you're basically saying Shoeless Joe's gonna show up.
That's right, yeah. He's gonna come out of the pond.
Corn stay out.
This park's gonna rival every other park.
Oh, yeah.
This is, it's shaping up nice.
Doesn't have a beach, but
They'll take pressure off of Machad for tournaments.
Yeah.
Or they'll just add more teams to
Yeah.
make this as crowded, but no.
Yeah.
So really, John, what you're saying is the design of the field, the distance out to the outfield fence
Yep.
will accommodate all of that.
Yeah.
It really comes down to the amenities after that.
Yep.
That'll draw in
Yep.
the town ball
Yep.
people.
It's like the pool committee that,
Yeah.
got $100,000 video board.
Yeah. Yep, no, that is it. And, can we can find the dollars to do, 2 batting cages and a bullpen on both sides. And that's stuff we're just vetting out. So
Cool.
one thing that in the previous plan here, we had the possibility of doing a little ice rink out here, a portable one.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? We took that off because, well, now we're opening up the outdoor refrigerated ice rink at Hossie. And to be honest with you, the season's getting shorter and, we got 10 sites already out there. This is a community park. We usually put them in neighborhood parks. So we said, let's take that out and put some dollars towards some other amenities. So that's what we did there.
Okay, for an umpire dressing room in the stands too.
That's been discussed. Yeah. Yeah. And in umpire in dressing room in the stands or you're saying
Just
underneath?
somewhere underneath
Yep.
the stands, so you don't have to
Yep.
sit in your car.
No, I hear you. Have you done that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, because that was brought up. Can we take it to this level? And so can we have a little storage / area where the umpire can dress versus in the parking lot?
Yeah,
Yeah.
really fit at least 2 or 3 in there.
Yeah, yep. Now we just got to get the umpires, right?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
not easy to do that these days. Yeah. So that's where we're at with that. Any questions before I go on to the next
No.
little slide? Just to give you a little taste of what a challenge course would look like. You can take the playground out of there, but this is actually up in Golden Valley. Gives you an idea of what a challenge course.
Is that turf?
It's turf, yes, turf here on the 40-yard dash, and I think was that all turf? I know that, obviously that's grass, the guy's
Yeah.
mowing, but I think this might have been all artificial turf.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you could go deep into the fall.
yeah,
If we did turf.
Oh, yeah, what, I guess is our plan for turf?
I'm gonna look at that. I gotta think about that, if we had that as part of the challenge course cost. I would think we would,
Pretty
because,
expensive.
yeah. But you also gotta think about the wear and tear on our grass, so I'll have to follow up on that one. And then this just gives you an idea of the components, that you could have at the challenge course.
I know, there's just so much foot traffic that you tear up grass so quickly.
Yeah, so that's all, when you
Yeah,
look at,
that's all turf.
that's all turf, yeah, yeah. So I'll have to look just to verify that's the case, but my guess it would be. And then just moving on, this gives you a sample of what the building down by the playground and the splash pad would look like. A couple of unisex bathrooms in front, and then the other men's and the ladies on the sides. It'd be an open air shelter here to the right of this building that would look over, a splash pad playground. And if it works out well, we're gonna have a little tiered action where you can actually be standing up here and looking at the playground and the splash pad. And then as you go further down, you go down to that challenge course. So that gives you an idea of what we're looking at for a building. And then finally, East Community Park Phase 2, I'll back up. So we're designing Avonlea now. We'll go up for bids. Our goal is January of next year, constructed all of 2024, and then open in 25. And we'd have to hit the seating window, so we probably can open up some components of Avonlea, but maybe if all the turf is not there, we wouldn't just want people to, come on out. May have to wait till the summer, or maybe some fields even in the fall. But we'll have irrigation there. If we get lucky and we get the seed in at the appropriate time in 2024, we might have some better grass in early 2025. And then, Gillian, finally, this is East Community Park Phase 2. We designed this in 2024 and then construct in 2025. That's just, some addition of some trails and some trailhead. Now, this trailhead, $400,000 will be coming from the county to construct that. And then just some overlooks and some other amenities. So that's kind of the update. You guys have any questions or comments on that?
This is incredible. Cool.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yep.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks, sir.
Smoke those left-handed cigarettes behind the.
That's right.
Did we always plan first?
Yeah, it's kind of an open area where they could practice, yeah.
Oh, where they could
Yeah,
practice?
it could be lacrosse as well, too.
But it's not lined.
Pardon me?
There's no lines up there, right?
Right now at East?
At East, the plan is not to have lines. It's just an open field, right?
Well, I think we could, we're gonna have a little parking lot there, so I'm not gonna say we'll never have lines out there.
Sure.
Yeah, because, lacrosse is looking for fields at times, and we trying to look for spots, so if it needed to be lined, we could may need to do
I'm
that.
not anti-line, I just thought it was more, that part was seemed to be more of a natural.
Well, that was the thing to me, that the clientele going to that park weren't necessarily parents with soccer kids.
Yeah. So we're just showing it as a practice field, you know.
It's big enough to do something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I mean, sometimes you'll get a team or a club that, you know, they want a smaller place to practice on a regular basis or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. Okay, shifting, we're gonna take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back.
All right. So, we thought it'd be helpful to just go over some of the, some of the topics that of note from the legislative session that specifically impact the city. And so we've gone through these. We can go through them one by one and talk if you'd like. We went through the cannabis discussion. The bonding bill, we were very successful there. We received over $14 million for 2 projects. The first is $7 million for the rail storage yard. I will say that those discussions are challenging with Progressive Rail. And we also have the $800,000 in federal money. I did have my monthly meeting with our federal lobbyist today. And just we'll talk about different strategies on how to use that, and as well as to leverage it on some other things with Progressive Rail too. So other than that, I would just say stay tuned. We're still discussing with them.
How does I'm not real familiar with how like the timing on the federal money works.
The federal money, we have a long time. I want to say like 29 or something like that.
Okay.
The state money, I think we have a meeting set up in the next week or two to talk with the state about budget projects. So we'll have a little bit more clarity on that. But there's usually a couple of years you have to spend that as well. So.
Maybe things will go better now that it's not hypothetical.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. It's the details that are the issues. And so. And then we also received $7.1 million for the public training facility. That was a surprise. Very, very happy to see that. Did put the specific language that's in there. And I have reached out to all the departments in Dakota County to see if they'd be interested in partnering as well, because most likely $7 million is not going to get us what we want. Unless we really dumb it down. Received a little bit of interest so far from some potential partners. We got a good JPA example from Maple Grove. Maple Grove owns and operates their facility, and then they received some capital contributions from Plymouth and Brooklyn Park. But it still is a city facility. City has control of it, but those partners had some preferred time and things like that. So I think we have a good example of what we can do there. Likewise, and then that kind of goes in then, or I should say the next steps then are we're going to be soliciting an RFP for architecture services. We'll be doing that here yet this year, hopefully get some preliminary design. The fastest, if we really hustle, would be to begin construction next year. We'll see how that goes.
But are we gonna put an RFP and say demolish and rebuild, or, okay, so no retrofits?
No, we looked at it. I think it's going to be really hard to
Okay.
retrofit it. It's just easier to scrape it.
Would money from the next item, could that be used as well?
So yes, so the public safety aid, that's one-time money based on population, and ours is going to be just over $3 million, 3.1. We're set to receive that by this year, by the end of this year, and really, it's pretty loose on what we can use it on. There's a couple things we can't use it on, and I put the actual word what we can't use it on, but other than that, it can be used for public safety. And just a reminder, it doesn't have to be just police, it could also be fire. And so I think we're gonna have a longer discussion maybe about what we want to use that on. So we all know there's lots of needs on that side, if not here.
Wasn't the number
Transition.
for fire department like 800,000 just for the capital improvements, or three?
Yeah, I mean, so we could use it on the transition cost to get from the, if we do get the grant, there's going to be, a time 3 years down the road where we're not going to have the grants. So we want to start to use some of this money to offset that tax impact. We also know there's going to be capital costs to renovate stations to go to full-time. At least from a staff perspective, we would be very hesitant to just use it for salaries, to increase salaries for police and fire, things like that. It's one-time money.
Yeah.
And so I know some other cities are doing that. And I think there might have been some discussion amongst the legislators that that's what they thought it'd be. I have a hard time justifying that from a budgeting standpoint. So,
Right.
but otherwise, it's pretty clear or pretty loose on what we can use it on. Questions on that?
No.
Good. Juneteenth, we celebrated it last week, so that's an official city holiday now. Metro sales tax for affordable housing, so a new quarter-cent sales tax only in the metropolitan area that will be then divided to cities, and it's based on percentage of homes that are in financial distress, I think is how it's, or housing distressed, I think. So proportion of families that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, I think is how it's determined. And they have a formula for it, but we think it's going to be around $300,000 annually we have to use. I think Tina said we have to use it in 2 years. So every 2 years, we have to spend $600,000. It can be used for debt. So if we were to issue bonds or to help offset some costs or something, we could do that. Otherwise, we could use it for home rehab programs, first-time homebuyer programs, down payment assistance programs. The CDA, I'm sure, would be willing to administer it for us if we wanted to give it to them. I'm not suggesting we do that. So land trust, there's a whole host of things, much like the cannabis regulations. I think there's going to be some more guidance coming out about this as well. So.
Can I just jump in for a second on that? So I had a conversation with Habitat for Humanity last week. They had presented to the Regional Council of Mayors. They've got 2 programs now, one with Roseville, one with Edina, where they work on that land trust concept where the city or the trust owns land to help preserve single-family natural occurring affordable housing. And I have a discussion at some point with Habitat to kind of learn more, if that makes sense. Because what he told me, I'm like, oh, that's great, but we don't have any money. He said, yeah, but you're going to get $300,000 a year. So it would be nice to just be able to say, hey, this is what we're going to focus on. And he said typically the other part what they do is they send a letter on city letterhead to anybody that's valued at a certain level. It's 250, 350, whatever, and says, hey, the city's partnering with Habitat. If you're considering selling in the next 6 to 12 months, consider partnering with the city and Habitat, avoiding some real estate costs and certain.
So does Habitat do like renovation versus?
Right. So what they do is they typically find properties that need between $50,000 and $100,000 worth of upgrades. And they contract out all the professional electrical, plumbing, whatever, and then they use their volunteer services to do the rest. And they found that to be more efficient than just buying land and building from the ground up.
I mean, that was one of my first thoughts when I was reading that update, some sort of rehabilitation program.
But I do like the first-time home buyer credit too. Is a good idea. So.
Yeah, we can do multiple things, right?
You can also borrow against future dollars. If we wanted to do a partnership with someone, workforce housing or some kind of affordable housing, we can borrow against future dollars, kind of like you can with state aid.
Mm-hmm.
If you need a bigger pot of money. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Okay.
Do you have a contact with the Habitat person?
Yeah, his name is Chad.
Okay.
I got my email. Yeah, I was.
He's like a little bit more.
What I said to him was that it would be if I could find time in the next 4 to 5 months where he could come to a work session and give
Great.
a 20, 30 minute
Okay.
kind of update.
Yeah.
Now, Edina is unique because they have a tax. If you're building property that doesn't have affordable units, you have to pay a tax. It's like a park dead fee.
Yeah.
So they have absurd amounts of money. They're spending $300,000 a unit.
Yeah.
Or a home, I should say.
Yeah.
I guess the only other thing that I thought of was that how many people we have here now and their homes, et cetera, that it would be nice if we had some sort of like a grant program for people that are unlimited budgets but need their roofs replaced.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
yeah.
So that they can eventually turn around and sell it.
We
Yeah.
do through the CDA and our CDBG funds usually funnel about 150,000 towards that kind of a program, and it's income based. But yeah, we could broaden that kind of a concept with these dollars and do even more than what we do at the CDBG.
Yeah, it just keeps homes from getting disrepair.
That'd be an HRA conversation, or would we do that?
It could be. Well, this, it could be council or HRA, or it could be either one.
You're just saying because you want to have.
Yeah, you want to say,
Well, a legitimate meeting would be.
I didn't put in here, but there's also, I think it's a 0.75% sales tax for transportation, if I remember right. So I think they increased the total sales tax by 1%.
Yeah.
Through, so. Paid medical family leave. So this is going to take effect in January of 26. And as of now, it'll be a 0.7% payroll tax split between the employee and the employer. I think that the legislation allows it to go up to 1.3% without legislative approval. So once they get into it and they determine that it's not meeting.
Oh, they can raise it.
They can raise it. So,
And
right now, just based on our current payroll, the impact would be about $140,000. That's the employer portion, not the employee portion. So that'll obviously be a split, and then we could opt out of it, but we'd have to offer a similar plan or a plan that meets the same benefits. And so basically, I think it's 20 weeks. It's 12
Yeah.
or 20. So paid leave, and there's a floating scale based on your income. So it's supposed to supply up to 80% of your lost income, I think, for the lowest earners. And then as you go up, it goes up to a maximum of 50%, I think is what it is.
So my one question for the personnel committee to think about is, how is this going to impact, sorry, for the city staff in the room? Do we allow 450 hours carryover now, which is a financial liability for us, and people are going to be incentivized to, not use their vacation for sick leave. So anyway, I don't know what that means long-term for us, but it's a lot of hours.
we've talked briefly about that, but it's not a significant, I should say significant. It's not a majority of our staff that hold that balance.
Well, I'm saying, I think people just continue to accrue, and my point is, at some point, you could have a lot of city staff that have 400 hours.
They would have to be taken, I mean, if they were to utilize this as opposed to using PTO, they would have to be taking a pay cut. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many would choose to do that. They would probably supplement at the very least.
You take both.
You're, as I understand it, we have, under this plan, we'd have to allow for up to 20 weeks, I think. Dan, you might.
If you wanted to take 6 months off, can you do 20 weeks through the state and then another?
No, it has to be concurrent.
but you take the 20 weeks, but you can choose which bank you want to use. 20 weeks, right? Because this is designed for people that don't have.
It's designed for anybody,
Yeah,
but it's meant to benefit those who don't have
a balance.
a balance.
Yeah, so you can use whatever balance you have.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just,
Right now, you're allowed up to 12 weeks on FMLA.
well, that's what my question is. So what is our policy if somebody wanted to take 6 months leave from the city and they were going to have 20 weeks that they've in the state and then use PTO for the rest? Do we allow?
No, they'd have to get permission to do that.
Okay.
And that 50% too, for the highest income workers is not 50% of their salary, it's 50% of some
Right.
market.
Yeah.
It's some floating number that the new agency will determine. So I think that will be the disincentive. You can get 20 weeks, but it's going to be at a notably lower pay level.
This is so ridiculous.
So we'll keep watching that. Elections. So now you'll be able to put your ballot straight into the ballot machine 18 days beforehand, which we think will help. Not have as many.
What is it now?
It's 10 days, I believe. Is that right? So
It'll help with what? Less
not having,
people?
not having as many people come in that 10 to 18 day period and having to still fill out the envelope and we have to ballot board.
Yeah, it should eliminate a lot of in-person absentee voting. Because right now to vote early, you technically are just turning in your absentee ballot in person. Instead, you'll just feed your ballot straight into the machine instead of putting it in a box and then to be open to be counted later.
But we also have to be open more days now to accommodate this. And there's a lot more stuff. I just put the most impactful.
Is the overall time shortened at all?
No.
Still have to do with the 45 days in advance.
And we have 3 elections next year. We have the presidential preference primary.
They allow early voting for that?
Sure.
I'm
It's
pretty
the
sure
same
they do.
process for all.
Really?
Regular primary. And then the August primary and the November general.
There are 135 days.
You can basically vote half of next year.
Was there any money? I thought they spent,
The presidential preference primary, we get reimbursed.
okay, I thought they did some kind of election lover bill or something that's sent a bunch of money to
When
them.
does that go into effect? Does the school district have to do that this year? Or is it all starting next year? So when they go out
Some
and do the
term of
referendum,
the-
do they-
term of
we have a
election,
test run at it? Well, I guess they do it themselves.
Democracy Freedom Act or whatever.
Well,
Money
they're
versus-
debating with the county right now.
Oh.
I don't know if when it goes into effect.
Okay. Because most of those things usually go into effect August 1st, so I
Right.
guess they do the ballot. on August 1st.
Speaking of code compliance, get ready to have a lot of weed.
Oh.
Did you know that I'm the weed inspector's mayor?
What?
Inspectors.
That is-
As mayor, state
that
law
is-
dictates that I'm the weed inspector. I didn't
Well,
know that. My neighbor,
Did you get a city car for that?
and my neighbor is,
You'll be busy.
So we now have to allow native landscapes. I put the language in here. We still can't regulate the height, but this is gonna be trouble. I mean, we already have some people who try to say that their front yards are native landscapes and it's a real hassle. We'll have to talk to zoning and how we'll have to do some ordinance changes to try to figure this out, so.
Hey,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, pretty much it boils down to height from my statute.
Basically, because I mean,
Or
anyway,
whatever you want.
I mean, it's gonna be really hard unless we have some botanist to tell what's a weed, what's a natural.
I mean, this is, if we really want to argue this does not include turf, grass, lawns left unattended
Right.
for the purpose of returning, so.
But somebody's gonna say they planted some grasses that are
Yeah.
purposely planted for aesthetic reasons. Just heads up on that.
So they don't, there is no, it's allowed, but there is no square footage restrictions or anything? Do they allow us to restrict by so many square feet?
It says we shall allow an owner to maintain a managed natural landscape. It doesn't say anything about,
Right.
it doesn't say anything about size. No, we won't be able to.
We won't be able to. No, I knew they shall allow it. I just didn't know if we do allow it, but we allow it as a percentage of how much property you own.
What we might be able to do is you have to get basically like a site improvement agreement or something like that. If you want to have something besides what's allowed now, we'd have to talk to the attorney and see, but maybe you have to file a plan, you know, and it has to be, they have to show that they maintain it, which is more work.
Do we have a
I've
high
always
volume,
wanted wildflowers.
high volume of those complaints right now? The weed complaints, is that one of them?
Probably.
I mean, we put a lot of assessments on people's property taxes for.
I could show you a house over in Valley Park that poor person next to him is trying to sell their house and they can't sell it. And we try, basically have to go to court and they're just not gonna
Yeah,
come.
the judges told.
Good.
And the
I got a
judges,
neighbor, I'm gonna.
anytime you get a resident who says, why can't you just go make him do it? Because the judge, whenever we go, even if we're giving them a month, they'll say, give them another month first. PTSD, so they did change the para bill to require that if a officer or a firefighter files for permanent disability, they have to be treated first, which we think is a good thing. was really getting abused. Look, there are legitimate cases, but it was also being abused. So,
How does that impact current cases or folks?
if they've already received it, then they're fine. They'll keep receiving it.
But actually, there's a good benefit that they were saying that they got in, if you were injured as like a young officer, it used to be where you got a lower percentage, but now they closed that gap, I guess. So now you get 100% or something.
And they also put in there, so right now, if the officer, somebody goes out on PTSD, say they're 40 years old, the city's on the hook for their health insurance till they're 65. And that gets expensive. And we've had a couple of those. We bought some out, but now, and the cities or the state's supposed to have been reimbursing us for that. That percentage has been going down every year. They've now beefed that up and said that they will be reimbursing cities for that cost. So,
Went back.
I don't know if they'll go back. Earned safe and sick. So this is similar to the family medical leave. This, for most of our employees, at least full-time employees, we meet this threshold already, but this will now apply to liquor store, paid on-call firefighters. We'll have to start providing them sick time or comparables.
How does that work?
That's going to be a good question. I mean, I don't know how a paid on-call firefighter uses sick time.
Right, because if you're not calling in for a call, like you're not.
I know.
But you're not accumulating, if you're not called in, then you don't accumulate any hours.
But you have to do so many hours.
But if you are, my question is, let's say you accumulate, let's say you have 40 hours. Do you get, and say a page goes out, you just don't respond, do you put in that you get paid out of your sick leave?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I imagine it might be maybe if I'm a paid on-call firefighter and I have shoulder surgery. And so,
Use that.
but you'd have to calculate how much you're missing.
So we'll have to, we'll start figuring that out too. So,
Might be important to them from a call response number
Yeah.
as part of their record
Right.
to keep up.
yeah, if they can use that as credit for hitting their 30% of calls or whatever.
Well, and lawn mowing guys too, huh?
Yeah. So that's, those are the big ones. I'm sure there's a lot more.
What, for seasonal employees, will we have to pay that out at the end of the season? You have a warming house attendant that collects 6 hours? Do we have to-
Yeah, I don't know, because I know you're required to pay out vacation and PTO, sick, not necessarily, and we never pay out 100% of sick. So we might, I think we do 50%.
I thought sick was something where you
Tammy just
use it
texted,
or lose it.
well, Tammy just texted me and said sick leave is not paid out for this. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Tammy.
Not you gotta be sick to actually get it.
Well, sick or, as this says, mental or physical illness, preventative care, absence related to domestic abuse, sexual assault or stalking.
Well, and typically, a lot of times if it's gonna be more than so many days, don't you have a policy to have a doctor's note to go with it?
we can require that, yeah.
Yeah, and so
So you'd have to have, is there gonna be a policy written for requirement for, I mean, the sick fam, a lot of this is just sick time, but there are some new things here.
Yeah, you can use it for school closing.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to look at our policy and have to do some tweaking. I'm sure.
yeah, that's right, it was for snow days or whatever.
Yeah. Whether a public emergency,
Which, in some ways, I get it.
Right.
It's tough as a parent.
Mhm.
Suddenly your kids are called out and you don't have daycare for them.
you end up losing the right for it.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Thank you. Yep, ton of takeaways.
A little work to do.
Like divided government where there's no changes. Okay, moving on to items for future discussion. I know council member,
I've got one and I'll go fast.
go ahead.
Just because I know we're like an hour. Dog barking ordinance. And
Dog barking?
yeah,
you say?
dog barking ordinance.
Okay.
Anti-barking ordinance. So I had a constituent reach out who had, I think, an issue with a neighbor's dog barking. We shared we do have an ordinance, I believe, Justin, I think you said it was written in 1979. This didn't ultimately end up to be an issue for this constituent, but he did quite a bit of research into neighboring communities' ordinances and thinks that our ordinance is woefully outdated, that and I think the one he sent me was Apple Valley, just sets out, it's not necessarily stronger, it just sets out some prescribed steps, give them a warning, they should do this. There's just a little more thought, I think, that went into it, and I said I would bring it to the council to see if it was something we wanted to discuss. I think my first view on it is if it's not broke, why fix it? And I don't think we get a lot of complaints in this space, but I think what he was saying did make some sense that, if there is more of a prescribed process, that could be useful. So anyway, I just bring it to the council for consideration for a future topic.
What about dogs that smoke?
I think they're
Dogs that
exempted
what?
under the law. I don't think we can regulate them.
Well,
I
I
just-
think anytime we want to look at an ordinance, even if we're not going to change it, it's a good thing. I mean, if it's really been since 1979, sometimes it's just good to relook at some of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was on these same emails. I felt comfortable with what is there, but we can certainly have the conversation.
Doesn't mean it has to change, but at
mean,
least,
the
have
same
the
time-
conversation.
And there's one request I hesitate to do a ton of, if it's something that we've seen some trends around or several requests for, that's kind of usually when it to me prompts more research, but I don't know, I haven't seen much of an issue with how our current ordinance is stated, but
No matter how, I mean, we could surely bring it back. It's another one that's really difficult to enforce, no matter how good the ordinance is, but we can bring something back.
Okay, anything else? Okay, any committee or city administrator updates?
We had Air Lake Airport Advisory meeting on June 8th, I think it was. We actually had it out at the airport. The hope was to have it at the new hangar. It wasn't quite ready for the meeting, but we did get a tour of the new hangar, and it's pretty impressive.
Cool.
And then July 9th is the fly-in breakfast. So typically it's at the tail end of Panaprog. So it's gonna be at the front end of Panaprog, and it's gonna be at that facility. And then we had a public safety committee meeting where we talked with the fire department, just got an update on information about their transition to a hybrid department, and then reviewed some police department policies that were mostly things that they're just matching their policies up with state mandates from non-post board.
Okay.
In case I missed, did I miss anything?
oh, that's good.
Held the ALF meeting, and it was a presentation on a lot of statistics, but one of the things that I got out of that was an offer to do a ride-along. Cool. With ALF, so, but the offer extends to anyone that's interested. Thought it might be interesting to get a little more inside view of what paramedics are doing.
Where would you ride though? Because isn't there usually two people in the?
In the back, I don't know, on the stretcher.
There's plenty of bench in the back.
So they're gonna get called
You have to
somewhere,
take
then
it
they're
to
just gonna
Brandon.
leave you there?
I can't say I know how it would work if we actually got a call, but I think it would be interesting.
It would be.
So,
There's a couple jump seats in the back.
Regional council mayor update, that we didn't really have much at the last meeting, but at our next meeting, it's, they annually, I guess, have the mayors invite their superintendents, and all three of our superintendents will be attending, so.
Great.
That'll be good to engage with them. So.
And then, for the arenas, the I think I mentioned to you last month that they were looking into one of the things that wasn't in the bid, whose responsibility it was to pay for that. Well, it technically is ours, so. So anyway, it's all worked out. Joe's got it all worked out and it'll work out. But, he also asked us to, approve up to $155,000. There is, I don't remember what was in the bid that we're not gonna, utilize.
No, it was sprinklers.
Sprinklers, that's what it is. And so then, we authorized them up to $155,000 to be able to do some little extras. That would be like aluminum benches.
This is for Hossie.
For the Hossie outdoor. So anyway, I'll have more detail when he works through what's the actual cost of his list of items that he had for potential.
Is there spectator seating at that?
Oh, that's
what
what
they're
the
talking
aluminum
about?
bench.
I thought you meant for like.
No. So,
Aluminum versus wood.
yeah, aluminum, just like the baseball field. All I can think about is my hot butt, my cold butt. So
Yeah.
tape, but aluminum just doesn't, it's not one of my favorite.
Durable though, it's gonna be on the elements.
Yeah.
How about heating?
I like chafe. That's
Yeah. Run some just coils on.
Well, and that is the thing is that he's gonna talk to LHA too, because if we're starting to look at some of the little extras to enhance the space, he's hoping that they'll also want to chip in on some things that would actually enhance the space, so. That's kind of where he's at for right now.
This isn't a committee update, but this is probably a good, I won't be at the parade, but is there anything that needs to be brought up about Panaprog Parade as a float? We
Float's
talked about
registered.
ices.
Got ices.
What, floats registered?
Registered, if I hear anything from,
Usually find out like the day before.
Yeah.
okay, I can touch base with them too to see.
They have your bios, I think.
Yep.
My name's still gonna be on the float if I'm not on it.
Yeah.
And extension.
Okay.
It's like a tier.
Yeah, and Doug liked to sit on top.
Yeah.
Where did we get that float? Whose float is that?
Panaprog ways.
They just made it for us.
They just supply it? Because I don't know about you all, but I think most of us would be more comfortable with just a flat platform as opposed to a tiered.
Yes, I know, it just reminds me like the king
Yeah, the
and queen
shelves.
are supposed to sit
Yeah,
up
it's like,
there.
there's the mayor basically on the top of it. It just goes by himself. I'm just like,
In a single file chair.
I mean, I don't want to,
Oh, I can see.
like, to be honest, I'd rather just have cars and just have like 5 cars and sit in there, 3 cars or whatever, but I think they like the.
Or a trailer even, like you said, Josh.
A boat, a pontoon, I don't know. I've now done it 3 times, I think, and each time I'm uncomfortable.
I just like to sit, I sit inside. Yeah.
I didn't plan this trip around the parade, but.
Well, I sit right by the tongue, so that way because of my weight, I want to make sure I'm not, over. Well, it's the truth. I need that poor float.
Yeah, well, the problem is then the astroturf gets hot, so it's like.
But I was just grateful for the lower truck last year, so I didn't, before I had to bring a step stool so I could get up.
Well, we used to have the John Deere, I think that is not happening. Used to be full boat track.
Oh. You'll let us know when
Yeah,
we're
I'll
supposed
get
to
some
be
details and
there and
follow
what
up.
number we are. The bus thing. Yeah, because I always park at one end and then, so the bus thing gets changed all the time,
I
so.
also gotta flag down Brad. I'll take you down. On a golf cart.
Oh,
The wheels are in motion for these. We've got a supplier, we've got a halfway point where
How many are you gonna do this year?
1,400.
Okay.
It's a fine balance. What will fit in the freezer and each individual cooler.
Sounded like quite the.
So it's not like a
Logistics.
simple, hey, there was some math involved. So
I'm just glad you're willing to do it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
it's fun. Yeah.
Until the parents start getting nasty.
Yeah.
On the room. It's kind of funny how nasty some of the parents.
What do they
when-
get nasty
When their
about? Just
kid
that they
does
don't-
not get nasty,
Oh.
because you're
Does it have-
randomly tossing them out and then they'll track you down and a block away to get an icy for their child.
But why didn't you have one for all 20,000?
So just be prepared.
Freezer space.
That's right.
Yeah, we will miss you in the fact that you are a really good runner for handing out ices.
I think it is a lot of fun.
It is.
I'm sad.
And I'm gonna be really comfortable on the floor while everybody else is. I can hand them to you guys.
Yeah, my kids will be there to help.
Perfect.
You hand them or throw them?
I think parade rules require.
Not
you to
able.
hand.
Yeah.
Boy, that sounds.
By the end of the parade, that gets kind of.
You can drop at their feet, it's
Sticky.
kind of underhand slide. I mean, it's.
You
Okay,
pick it-
anything else?
Just a reminder that July 3rd meeting's canceled.
Yep.
So July 17th will probably be lengthy. Still too far in advance to really know for sure.
It won't be 10 minutes.
It won't be 10 minutes. I know we have these two presentations. And in the July work session right now, if I remember right, CIP will be one of the big topics. We're also going to have Maxfield come and present their housing study that they presented to the EDC.
Okay.
And financial quarterly report. That'll be Julie Stahl's first day. She's finance director, so she'll probably come. And
Oh, okay, so you got that worked out then.
yeah, she accepted. We're good to go.
No, I mean, the timing, I just wasn't sure when she was gonna be able
Yeah,
to
there won't
start.
be any overlap with Geraldine officially, but staff is fine.
Right.
Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.